Thinkers and gamers, happy Friday night. How was your week? I hope that you enjoyed yourself. I hope that you were able to get some good gaming and appreciation of great storytelling in. I'm so happy, as always, to be ringing in a weekend with you. This is Tales of Praxis. I'm your host, Aaron Suduko, the founder of withatterriblefate.com, your first and final source for all literary studies and celebrations of video games. If you love spending long hours going through journeys in these games and valuing their interactivity, not just as a gameplay challenge, but also as an experientially oriented story, you have found yourself in the right place. Tales of Praxis, if you aren't familiar with it, is... Oh, sorry, Grail. I cut myself off because I was concerned when you said glitches. It might be a glitch in the stream, but I'm hoping we're okay. Yes, hello. Sorry to be starting a little bit late. For those of you, unlike Grail, who are not familiar with Tales of Praxis, it's a series I've been running on With a Terrible Fate for about a year at this point, just studying and working to better understand and celebrate the storytelling and narrative language of Bandai Namco's Tales JRPGs, or Tales of, if you prefer, those which started all the way back in 1995 with Tales of Fantasia, and which are still going strong as recently as Tales of Arise's Beyond the Dawn DLC last year, which we worked through right after its release, which was quite a lot of fun. Hey, Pottery, good to see you too. Tales is a series that, for me, as is the case for so many fans and gamers, it made a big impact on me growing up in terms of how I think about gaming, my interest in philosophy, how I make sense of my place in the world. And so now, being a philosopher of game narrative, I wanted to return to the series on the occasion of them remastering my very first Tales game and first video game story, really, Tales of Symphonia, and replay all of the ones that I had played before that meant so much to me, and also fill the gaps, the series entries that I didn't get to the first time around, and try to understand and answer the questions such as, what are the themes these games are concerned with when we view the series as a whole? What are the various topics that they want their players to wrestle with? What's the language that they put together as stories and as games, and to compel us to wrestle with these ideas, and how do those convert into tools for us to navigate those themes in our real lives differently? So we've been doing that in two forms for the last year. One has been the form of these wonderful streamed live book clubs, long, extensive playthroughs and studies and discussions of the various Tales entries, most recently wrapping up Tales of Grace's F, which, knock on wood, will hopefully be done with in the next few streams, but we'll see. And then the other half of the equation has been my more traditional long-form analytical articles studying particular aspects of the series and its narrative in a variety of ways, whether that's comparative study between different entries, or looking at particular characters in depth, looking at symbolism and trying to understand how various symbols in the games can allow us to understand our journeys in them differently. If you want the latest one, which is just about a week old at this point, I encourage you to check out, speaking of going all the way back to 95 and Tales of Fantasia, a study which does exactly that, looking at Chester Berklight, one of the characters from Tales of Fantasia, trying to understand what he means, not just as a character, but also as a symbol and a kind of cipher for making sense of that game, and then extending that out to the other games in the Azalea series that we have gotten in the States and the Western world, which is to say Tales of Symphonia and Dawn of the New World. So, if you're interested in what we're about, check that out. Keep hanging on the stream because you'll see a lot of it in action. These discussions with what I love to call the real-life JRPG party in the chat is the bread and butter of why I get so much value out of this series. And we really do bring so many different backgrounds in terms of our gaming interests and also familiarity with the Tales series to these streams. But like we've been talking about, especially in the last couple streams, that's part of what makes it such a rewarding endeavor, because we bring our own interest to the game and leave with a new way of thinking about them that is different than any single insight offered by any single person in the party. Regulars like Pottery and Grail, who are hanging out in the chat, have extraordinarily deep familiarity with the Tales series, as is the case, I would modestly say, for myself, if I can speak on a Friday evening. But I was actually just talking with a longtime fan of the publication earlier today who doesn't hang out in the chats because the timing doesn't work for him, but he always watches the VODs. And he said, my other favorite thing on the other end of the spectrum in terms of people who watch it, saying, yeah, it's not only that I don't know anything about the Tales series, I really am not even interested in as a gamer in playing JRPGs at all. It's not my genre. I can't really get into it, but I always tune in because I love listening to the discussions. I'll put it on in the background and I get little nuggets of insight to get me to think about games differently and think about my work in game development differently, because this guy is a game dev too. So it's a full spectrum of players with different experiences, which is a lot of fun. We'll get to the Zhonecage, Gray. I'll put a pin in that. Because actually it is on my list, it being a Friday stream and also us being eager to work through the end of Tales of Grace's F, to get into the stream a little bit more timely this evening. So a couple other things just to mention in terms of things to look forward to. That same longtime follower of the site with whom I was speaking earlier, I don't think I'll get in trouble with him for mentioning this because I'm not going to say anything specific, but I have to tease it, especially if he happens to be watching the VOD later, because I'm very excited about the possibilities. We talked earlier this week about the ways in which I'm considering building out With the Terrible Fates streaming presence to go beyond Tales of Praxis, because as much as this stream is synonymous with Tales of Praxis right now, it is the official stream for the whole publication. And so I'm hoping to diversify the kinds of live book clubs and other sorts of studies we're able to publish on here and invite people to. And this gentleman with whom I was talking has a really interesting idea for an extensive study of a very different kind of game experience with a different kind of game, and something that resonates with the ethos of what With a Terrible Fate is deeply fundamentally about, in terms of trying to build new language for understanding and appreciating the value of video game storytelling, but from a very different perspective from someone like me. So we're exploring what that might look like as the next kind of pilot adventure on the stream. So I'm very excited about that. Like I said, it's too early for me to share any more details, but I'm so excited about it that I had to share it with the people who are already fans of the stream. That's right. It's narrative meaning all the way down, Grail, like turtles all the way down in the metaphysics of the cosmos. We're digging into narrative on narrative. Variety in the very loose sense of the term, where, as on With the Terrible Fate, we are strictly unified around the idea of understanding video games as a storytelling medium in new ways. But doing that, it turns out, can invoke a variety of different methods and modes of engagement, which actually it's funny because we try to do a lot of variety, but what people have told me over the years and what I aspire to is you can tell pretty quickly, if you're familiar with our content, when something new that comes out is something of ours or was inspired by something of ours, because even if you put that single flag in the ground and say, all right, we love video games, but we want to think about them solely as a storytelling medium, a lot of the ways in which people think about and talk about many of the great things about video games thereby become outside of your focus. And so that's a big part of how I've tried to continue to cultivate With a Terrible Fate, as something that is recognizable and has a clear mission over the years, even as we build out into other things. So I think that's a long-winded way of saying a good kind of variety channel, if you will. And as always, if there are other kinds of experiences on this live book club streaming adventure that we're continuing to explore as a publication that you're interested in, let me know. Always happy to listen to the great fans, thinkers, and gamers and all of that. I'm continuing to get further into and get really excited by this study that I think now it's fair to say I'm working on. I'm no longer just contemplating it, although the line is not always a clear distinction, of Tales of Zestiria and Berseria. It's great to be back in those worlds. And without spoiling too much of what I'm thinking about beyond the themes and kind of structure that I've already discussed, I had occasion today and over the last couple days to dig back into, I think, really one of the very first works of philosophy that I ever read back when I was probably in 9th or 10th grade and didn't even really understand what philosophy was yet. But if you're familiar with Adam Smith from the way in which he is typically known, which is his contributions to economics, and he wrote this book, The Wealth of Nations, and if you've heard of the idea of the invisible hand and capitalism, that's Smith. But he wrote 2 books, and the other one is called A Theory of Moral Sentiments, which is basically soup to nuts his perspective on what it is to live in the world as a moral agent and where we get our moral sensibilities from. And I'm not totally convinced it's the best way into Zisteria and Berseria yet, but it's one of those things, like with a lot of the works that I do that apply outside philosophers or modes of thought to games, where the more time I'm spending kind of turning it over in my head, as I did with Wittgenstein and Xenoblade Chronicles 3, for example, the more connective tissue I'm seeing, and it's helping me to piece together different parts of the game that didn't have obvious connections for me. So fun to go back in my own past in a very Tales-inspired way to one of my first experiences with philosophy in order to make sense of 2 games that, as you all know, are near and dear to my heart. So it hopefully won't turn into a project of the same scope as the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 one. In fact, I'm fairly certain that I will make it the case that it will not, but it's a similar kind of vibe. So especially if you've been enjoying the little points of intersection between Tales and other schools of intellectual and cultural thought in Tales of Praxis, things like my publication on esoteric Jewish practices and Tales of the Abyss, or even more recently thinking about the philosophy of physics and the notion of time's arrow in that Tales of Fantasia study that I linked. You should have hopefully a good amount to sink your teeth into in this new one as well, and plenty of fun opportunities for us to dive back into Zisteria and Berseria without having to pick back up that god-awful equipment crafting system and weapon management system and everything else that we love to hate about those games. There's a lot to love. Don't forget about that. All right, so you're quite seriously gunning for the Resident Evil 1, Grail. That's actually helpful for me because I wasn't sure whether you just were mentioning it offhandedly as a joke last time or if you were seriously interested in it. So I will put that down on my official clipboard of ideas so that I can keep track of it. I'm sure it would be fun. Yes, we actually, one of the first things that was published on With a Terrible Fate beyond my work back when my friend Nate was contributing to the site was an article on Resident Evil 4, which is certainly not the same kind of work that we do nowadays, although I would say in the same sense I was just talking about, it's unified in the underlying spirit. But if you want to read something which is older and about Resident Evil 4 at this point, I'll go ahead and share that so you can have some food for thought. But yes, especially given that I haven't played them before and everything we were talking about last time, I think that could be a lot of fun. I think that's really the long and the short of the updates I had that were not Tales of Grace's F related. I do have a couple Tales of Grace's F things. Another thing is that right after this, actually, we're going to be recording another podcast. So probably some of the things that I'm talking about with Tales will be fresh in my mind, and I'll be discussing it with Dan. So look forward to that in the next few days too, and we'll have more to chat about on the stream thereafter. So for Tales of Grace's F stuff, you'll be happy to know that I'm going to switch over here. I was delaying the switching over as much as anything to spare Grail from the music because I know Grail's already lost his mind about this. But as you can see, I actually did put some time into grinding as was suggested. It's funny. I put enough time into the grinding that I think I might just do a post-mortem about it on the podcast tonight because I realized I hadn't grinded in a video game, like proper grinding with a capital G, in quite a while. And then yesterday, a significant portion of my day was distributed between grinding in Tales of Grace's F and grinding in Tales of Hearts, but for very different reasons, because here I wanted to make sure that we had sufficient standing to actually make progress in the content that we wanted to get through, whereas in Tales of Hearts, I'm still in the relatively early phases of the story, I feel, so it was one of those, I guess for me at least, more typical grinding experiences in a JRPG, where sometimes you just like to take a break from the story, enjoy the combat system a little bit, and watch the character's abilities and stats unfold and improve before you continue on in the story. So it was very unusual, but very fun to go from no grinding in a long time to two very different kinds of grinding side by side. Yeah, absolutely, Pottery. And I did take note of that because we had a longer conversation about that. But good to know that Celeste is not on that list. That's interesting to me. I wouldn't have known that, having played probably just like 2.5 screens of Celeste a couple years ago at this point. So good. Well, then maybe I'll take this weekend and think about what I want to do with the stream more broadly for the next little bit, because as we were talking about, I definitely need another palate cleansing game to just juggle with my Tales games. And whether we do that on stream or off stream will be another story, but I will put my thinking cap on about that. They are very fun, Grail. Very different experiences, like I said, just with the different, I think between the different goals I had for the grinding and then also the different places in the game. So taking a break to grind and develop abilities when the characters are just about, I think level 30, 35 versus when you're super duper late game like this, and the grinding is a little bit, let's say, crunchier. Two very different experiences. I think I probably enjoyed the grinding in Hearts a little bit more, but hopefully, knock on wood, I don't want to jinx us. The party has jumped, I think probably about 15 levels. I was kind of keeping track, which took about 3 hours, if you're curious, of Aaron just grinding that one floor that we were stuck on. So hopefully it'll be easier for us to deal with right now. Yeah, that's fair. It wouldn't be a Twitch stream if we didn't get some Aaron rage in before all was said and done. All right, Pottery, I will emphasize the Outer Wilds one on the official list also. Let me put that over there. That also has the added benefit that maybe if I start streaming it, it'll be easier for Camus, our other beloved analyst who has wanted to write about Outer Wilds for a while, to get back into the groove and start publishing on that. So see, it's all connected. Yes, put a pin just for a moment in that, Grail, because that's actually one of the things that I wanted to talk about, was that specific art. To that point, actually, one of the things that I wanted to chat about, I don't have a lot of preamble for this stream because, like we have been saying in the last couple streams, we're mostly working through the EX dungeon and thinking through things at kind of a broader, non-linear level, since I won't say the narrative has wrapped up, because it clearly hasn't based on what we've been seeing, but it's at a different kind of post-game pace now. But I did have a couple thoughts. One, I want to actually show you that art that Grail was talking about before we go and discuss why I named the stream what I did, because that was my main thought that was really quite interesting to me. The other thing that I wanted to just put in our minds, which may or may not be related, I think it probably is. This is going to sound just like a random free association thought, but it occurred to me earlier today, and I think we might get a little bit more mileage in thinking about it than we expect. Because you'll recall, one of the things that we talked a decent amount about in Tales of Zestiria, since now I'm back and revisiting Zestiria, and that it was quite iconic for at the time in the Tales series, was its very unusual battle system of armatization and these fusions between characters. And so we explored, well, what are the thematic implications of that? What's it trying to say about the characters and how they relate to each other and what constitutes personhood in this world? All of those good things. And I think given how unusual that combat system makes Tales of Zestiria feel amongst the Tales games, it's easy to think that the underlying thematic idea that it's working with, that mechanic, is also relatively novel, new to Zestiria. And I was just sitting here today thinking, man, it doesn't seem at first blush to be that similar, but I don't think it's a coincidence that we have dualizing as the main equipment development and item creation mechanic in Tales of Grace's F, when the game, as we've been talking about in these last few streams, especially since the conclusion of Act 4, is pretty deeply concerned with what it means to progress by synthesizing your identity or sense of self with someone else without losing those things that constitute you as a person or the other person, in the ways we've been talking about with Asbel and Lambda, Sophie and the Little Queen, even Lambda and the Fodra Queen herself, to name just a few examples. And so it was a funny occasion to me because in the first place, it made me feel like turning over that rock revealed a way in which a mechanic which we might not be inclined to connect to the rest of the game's storytelling and theming, this mechanic of dualization, maybe feels so nice in this world, not just because it's a well-oiled and fun mechanic, but also because it does thematically resonate with a lot of how the game is showing you it makes sense to progress in life in all aspects of this game. But then also, the more I was thinking about that, once I started seeing Tales of Grace's F as something that might be in the same lineage as Tales of Zestiria and Armatization, it also occurred to me, like, man, it's not really new there either, because, and again, I'm going to only very lightly spoil, since I really, really want to prioritize working through Tales of Eternia with the stream for all the reasons we've talked about in the past. But that idea of fusing in a way that honors both the parts but creates something that is greater than the duality between the parts is something that I think, having played those early games now, really has its roots with a capital R in Tales of Eternia, because if you know, and Grail, I know that ends up being a huge part of what that story is about. And so seeing something that might, in isolation, feel like a novel game mechanic like Tales of Zestiria, as in fact part of this broader heritage, it was a cool little insight to me in terms of exactly the kinds of things that we're trying to do with Tales of Praxis, picking out things that are not just interesting in a vacuum with one of these games, but understanding them as aspects of a language that have been developed and deployed over almost 30 years worth of games at this point. And that idea of synthesis of the parts into a different kind of whole will factor into what I want to talk about after we see this art as well. I have been very upfront about how little I have touched Exilia. Also, I'll remind everyone, I am happy to wear my ignorance on my sleeve, but that's probably the only localized Tales game that you can roast me about at this point, since we've worked through, or I at least have worked through, all of the others except for Legendia, which I've played before, and Radiant Mythology for Tales of Praxis. So that's all to say, get your roasting in while you can, because it's not going to last long. I know, it's got me interested in the combat pottery for the reasons you're talking about. I do think that Asbel's relationship with Lambda, like we talked about in the fourth act, is a really important point to keep in mind there. I also think this is, I guess this is kind of a half spoiler because I'm sure we'll see it during the stream, but I also unlocked Pascal's hilarious level 100 spell, and I think even something like that, which references Pascal's attachment to another party member in a pretty direct way and gives her a new kind of strength, leads me to think that there are probably a decent number of ways in which that idea does manifest in the combat, even if it's not as overt as something like Armatization and Zestiria. Keep in mind also what we've been talking about before in terms of titles as well, right? There are a lot of titles which either are derived from characters' relationships with other characters or directly become accessible because of the time they spend with each other. We also talked about how basically all of the Excel titles in particular come about because of a way in which that particular party member is facilitating relationships beyond him or herself. So I think it's one of those things where once you sit down and look at all the pieces, you can notice it in a lot of ways that just take a little bit more work than Armatization, and that too might have some kind of thematic connotation that would be worth exploring at that point. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly. Nova abilities too. Good example of that. Yep. So I think, yeah, the more stones you turn over, like we're talking about, I think is a great way of seeing that. Yeah, and those titles, Pottery, exactly were the titles that I had in mind when I said that, so thank you for calling that out. Well, and I'll say, Grail, I'm obviously, as you know, not the gameplay expert that you are, but it was a lot of fun for me to use that level 100 art with Pascal, and from what I could discern, it seemed to be a pretty powerful art, so for whatever that's worth. Okay, well, bye, Pottery. That's funny timing, because the one thing that I was remembering to say for Pottery's benefit, and he might be gone now, but I'm sure he'll come back. So if you happen to still be here, Pottery, or Grail, you can also speak to this. The other technical thing I wanted to mention was I did take a little bit of time today to try to fix the master volume issue. I looked some stuff up about it online. It definitely seemed like, to no one's surprise, I'm not the only one with this issue, so I messed with it a little bit in Twitch. I tried to turn all of the volume up, and I did a bit of testing before the stream, so hopefully it'll be easier to get to a normalized loud volume if you need it than it has been in the past streams. But as always, let me know if there are technical issues that come up. Happy to resolve them on the fly, and Pottery specifically, since you were the one who was mentioning that. If and when you come back, I can try to remember to mention that again too, but just let me know. That will be a work in progress that we'll hopefully have sorted out before we jump into Exilia, which will be our next project. For those of you who are new to the stream, stay tuned after we wrap up Tales of Grace's F. Gonna, as I've been alluding to through this opening commentary, make kind of a broader game plan for the stream going forward. But the next place we're going to in the live book club aspect of Tales of Praxis will be Tales of Exilia, maybe with some extended stream hours, because if I know myself, I'll be champing at the bit to do that, since, as we were talking about, it's a new title for me in the Tales series, so try to keep me away from that. All right, my friendos. Well, like I said, I have one other bit of preamble that I was really excited to get to, but to see that, I have to show you the art that we unlocked for Asbel. So I guess as the final thing, since I was grinding and I didn't want you to miss anything, the relevant things that changed, obviously the levels, which you can see, but we also got a new sword for Asbel. So Grail, as you were saying, that material that we picked up in the Zhonecage was to give Asbel his strongest weapon, the disintegrator. So Asbel is more capable than he was before. I will admit, I miss already the swords that allude to and pay homage to other games. So I was a little bit happier when Asbel had the Fact Fantasia, or especially the Radiant Howl calling out Tales of the Abyss versus the Disintegrator. But it's a very cool looking sword, as you'll see, and there's no doubt that it makes Asbel more capable in combat, which we certainly need to get through the Zhonecage. I can't believe that either, Grail, to be honest, but you know, even a stopped clock is right twice a day, so take that as you will. We didn't get... I'm embarrassed to say we didn't get the whole party up to over level 100. I was hoping to, but man, one of the things that was surprising to me was just the steep drop-off in experience that enemies yield once you increase in level a certain amount. Because I swear to you, like, when I started out grinding the enemies on the floor that we stopped at, I was easily netting over 100,000 experience per battle. And then by the time the characters reached this level, it was down to maybe 20,000 experience points per battle. So I basically faced the decision point of being happy with my active battle party being over level 100, or else spending probably what would have been at least a couple extra hours to get Hubert and Malik up there. So they're not yet, but keep in mind we have a lot of the Zhonecage left, so I'm sure they'll get there. I know, I just lucked out on normal. How about that? Like I said, stopped clocks and all. I also took the time to fully develop the titles that Asbel, Pascal, Sophie, and Sharia got at level 100. Like you mentioned before, Grail, one of the just amazing things about Tales of Grace's F, this game that keeps on giving, is that, as is pretty common for Tales games, the characters all get titles at level 100. As is pretty uncommon, they all get pretty useful abilities, and many of them new arts attached to those titles. So I got those titles fully fleshed out so that we can enjoy all of that. And as always, especially since this game is so deeply concerned with titles, I'll show you those titles. They're all virtuoso titles. So the character in question has become a virtuoso of their particular battle technique or weapon that they use. So for Asbel, you're really into fighting, aren't you? That's why you got this title. Pretty blunt, short, sweet, and to the point, and especially after grinding 3 hours for it, enough to make me feel called out as a player. For Pascal, we got Virtuoso of Gun and Glyph, a glyph wielder whose skills are so far beyond imagination they can't be explained in words, which made me smile ear to ear when I got it, because could you think of a better description of the essence of Pascal, that she is so capable and ingrained in the world according to her particular mode of understanding that she can't even explain herself in words, just various sounds and Pascalisms. For Sophie, Virtuoso of the Fist, a prestigious title granted to those who master the path of both the fighter and the healer. Pretty bluntly descriptive of her combat style. And then for Sharia, probably the most interesting one to me, in the sense that they probably talked about this at some point in the story, but I didn't really process it at the time. The description of her Virtuoso of Art and Blade is she's the only person in the world who can heal with Krios arts without actually using Krios, which is part of what makes Sharia, I take it, so special as a healer. I was going to ask, because Grail, I'm sure you'll remember this, do we know that to be a product of when Sophie shared her particles with Sharia? Like, is that the explanation in the world of why she's able to do that and channel those healing arts? Or is that more of an open question? Because that was one of those things where, again, speaking to how central these titles are in the game, like I hadn't thought about that fact about what makes Sharia distinctive and so capable in a long time, if ever, in the stream. And so having that as the capstone on her 100 levels of development, I thought was really interesting. Capstone on the first 100 levels, I say, because for those who don't know, you can go at least up to 200 in this game, and in most, if not all, Tales games. So if we wanted to keep grinding, we certainly could, but I'm not there yet. Well, yeah, and that's part of why I'm confused about it, because you're right. If it's purely due to Sophie's abilities and particles, you would think it wouldn't render Sharia distinct, or I should say unique, in that way. We'll have to think more about why that's the case. Because again, it gave me pause because it didn't seem like something obvious based on what we knew about Sharia, but I have in the back of my mind maybe there was some quest or a little bit of Sharia dialogue that talked about this as her having this kind of special ability that others don't. Because yeah, that ability to channel healing Elith without anything like a Krios, pretty special and pretty cool. Oh yeah, that kind of development curve is the same way in every Tales game, Grail. Well, I think that just goes to show that I hadn't grinded in a while, right? And it was interesting. I think I've talked about on the stream before how I haven't had to grind at all in any of the Tales games, with the exception that I should have grinded in my Tales of Symphonia remastered playthrough because I ended up too underleveled to be able to do things like Abyssion and Nibelheim in the end, which if I were going back and doing Symphonia now, I certainly would make sure that we did that content. But, you know, it was my first stream. I was figuring things out at the time. But yeah, by and large, not a series that I at least find you have to grind for. And there are ways around it if you want to avoid it, although you always can grind. So it's interesting. Because I haven't turned the difficulty down on Tales of Grace's F, so I'm not going to say it forces me into grinding, but maybe it's another aspect of what we've been talking about in terms of just our intimate connection with these characters. Like, it might even be part of that that's motivating me to want to develop them further in a way that I haven't in the other games that we've worked through so far. So, something interesting to keep in mind for sure. That's it, we got it. She's a child of the full moon. Estelize wants to know your location. Yeah, the ability to channel healing arts is always marked as special. Think too about like Mint's lineage and Tales of Fantasia, even just that whole lineage connecting Rain with Mint in terms of maidens who are chosen by the unicorn. Yeah, yeah, that's interesting to think about the way in which healers are marked out as special, even among all the different abilities that people have in the world. That might be worth keeping under our hat for future conversations about healers. All right, well, hopefully we won't need to worry about sacrificing this item, but you never know. We'll see how it goes. All right. So, we're back to the floor where Aaron was suffering and having a hell of a time last time, and he's hoping ardently that it will be a better situation this time, but time will tell, my friends. Welcome back to Tales of Praxis. Again, I hope you're having a great Friday night, and put a pin in the last, and to me, most interesting thing that I wanted to chat about, because we have to see the art first. It's a bummer to have to start on 125, so we'll make do. So look at that art. I'll do it again so you can really watch it. It's called Aurora Lotus. You see Asbel channels this kind of bolt of pure light, and then 4 shadow aspects of Asbel appear from nowhere around the enemy and slice through them. So, just hold that in your mind, think about it. I'm sure you'll see it a few more times in this fight, and then we'll talk about it. Well, I had to sacrifice. I think it was another gem for the walls because, as I said, I was training on this floor, and then once you've done all of those levels of training, all you can do is fight the boss to get out, or else lose and sacrifice the item. And I didn't want to get through Emerald 2.0 without you all, so... But I went in planning the sacrifice for that reason, so it was at least less sad and difficult for that reason. It is definitely an art that immediately, for me, made combat feel markedly more manageable with Asbel, so I think in that sense I at least understand where your brother is coming from. And look at that, you can tell I've already been using it a decent amount because he just gained Aurora Lotus Adept. So, this was my thought on that, so you've seen it now. And actually, before I forget, I'm just gonna equip that Aurora Lotus Adept title because I want to continue developing it. Not least of which for the thematic reasons that I'm going to talk about. Ooh, it even comes with a chance of 1-hit kill. I like that. So let me show you the description of this art too. It's called a master art in reference to, I think, just the tier of art that all these characters that get them get at level 100. A master art in which Asbels of light strike down at foes from above. It ends with a sheathed sword. So channeling Asbels of light, and it's called Aurora Lotus. So I saw that, and it got me thinking again about something that we haven't talked about in a while, but remember, especially earlier on while we were working through the base game, I talked off and on about the various aspects of Buddhism in the game. Like the nature of suffering and how to let go of our attachments in the world, and the meaning of reincarnation and how to let go of these various cycles and inheritances of pain and suffering and misunderstanding and conditioned attachment that define us in ways that just bind us to the physical world throughout the game. And we talked about also how Asbel has a lotus marked out on the back of his jacket, which Dan Hughes, my dear friend and very accomplished East Asian and religious studies scholar when he was here, didn't quite buy into that. Dan also only had probably about 5 hours with the game, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But notice that, and now notice the title of that art, the master art that Asbel gets, Aurora Lotus. Something I think is definitely going on here in terms of marking out the idea of the game as this kind of Buddhist progression. And I think I mentioned it at the time. I don't fully remember. And I don't think I can easily call this up. Actually, I might be able to. Can we get... Is there an enemy book in here? Do you know, Grail? Is there a way that we can call up the images of enemies? Oh, here we go. Great. Where would... Do you know where the Fodra Queen would be? What kind of enemy she would be? Human, maybe? That'd be weird, because she's not really human. Oh, are you confused? I'm just asking if you know what kind of enemy the Fodra Queen was, because I was just hoping to find a picture of her in this. It's okay if we can't. Little Queens. Oh, it's literally a question mark icon. That's hilarious. I'd forgotten that. Good! It was totally worth it. So notice, and again, I think I mentioned this at the time, but she's also seated or standing atop a pink lotus, which is a very classical and core symbol in the Buddhist tradition, representing enlightenment and the Buddha. Yeah, floating atop it, if you prefer. So I was thinking about these various lotuses that we have in the game, and also remember the idea of the wheel on the back of Hubert's jacket as a representation of the Eightfold Path, which you get in Buddhism a lot too. But it's one of those ideas that seems really obvious after you have it, but with everything going on in like 120 hours of a game, sometimes you just need the right way of seeing things before you make the connection. Because remember, not that slime, the Fodra Queen. We've been talking for so long, and especially the last several themes, about the symbolism of flowers, specifically in Tales of Graces, a game where one of the main characters is named after a flower. One of her key side quests is tending a garden of flowers. Aston, Asbel's dad, comes to court and marry Carrie, his mom, through the tending of flowers in Lant, which becomes a metaphor for Asbel tending to the various members of his lordship when he's the lord, all the way to what we were talking about last time in terms of what the Chroma Dragons were telling us about the way in which Eleth was cultivated to support life on the world, presumably by the Amarcians, and how that's similar to a flower garden as well. And so I was thinking about that, and I said, man, I can't believe that I didn't consider the lotus flower in relation to that flower symbolism from the get-go as well, because I think there's a decent amount there. There's the sense in the game, like we have talked about, that there are all of these different just aspects of the lived human existence that create suffering, whether that's the fear of betrayal or the inability to express ourselves according to someone else, or the way in which we cling to particular attachments, maybe as defined by certain titles in our lives, or the way in which people see us. Or this need to feel safe against these dangers that we project onto the world around us. All these things that we grasp at for what ultimately in the Buddhist tradition would be explained as this illusory sense of self, right? We construct this artifice to give ourselves a sense of place and safety in the world, but really there's nothing tangible there at the end of the day. And what is it that you learn by going through this game? Well, you learn how to transcend and let go of those attachments and help other people and beings to do the same, right? In the way that Asbel is able to take Lambda into himself and heal Lambda and help Lambda become this different kind of being that can then do the same thing for the Fodra Queen. And so I thought it was really... it was a nice button on that idea for me, for Asbel to get this master art. As you say, Grail, really interesting term that it's a master art as opposed to an arcane art, when he's kind of, I would say, almost mastered his own development, because again, especially given how hard it is to level up at higher levels in this game, is it conceivable that you would reach level 100 earlier in the game than we have? Yeah, it's conceivable. You could technically do it if you had a lot of time on your hands and wanted to. But I think the odds are in favor of you really not getting that master art until around where we are in the story, where Asbel already has gone through all of this development and can now do exactly what he is doing, like effectively traveling back in time to help this range of other people from across his life and across space and time that we see represented in these bosses on the Focilos. It calls to my mind this idea of what in the Buddhist tradition is known as a bodhisattva. So again, like 2-second background on Buddhism from someone who is not an East Asian studies scholar, but who took some Buddhism courses back in his day. The idea, right, is to, through practices like meditation and contemplation of these religious texts, the sutras, and various modes of practice, basically let go of all of your attachments in the physical world, and then let go of all of your emotional and mental attachments, and basically recognize that the self you're clinging to is this illusion, and achieve enlightenment in the sense of transcending that individual identity by accessing what is known in Buddhism as the no self, or this thing that is prior to any conditioned attachment. And so when you talk about the Buddha, on whom the entire religion of Buddhism was founded, like the original Buddha Siddhartha, what he was able to achieve was basically transcending and finding a way in which to free himself from suffering by letting go of all of those attachments, practicing this certain kind of disciplined meditation, and achieving enlightenment and freeing himself from the cycle of death and rebirth that is called samsara, right? And that cycle of death and rebirth, of course, if you've been paying attention over the last 110 hours, is core to Tales of Grace's F as well. But then you have these kind of cosmic superheroes called Bodhisattvas. And what those are these beings or individuals who have attained enlightenment, like the Buddha, but instead of just leaving the cycle of death and rebirth, they stay in the physical world and travel throughout various realms and aspects of time and space to visit and help certain people and individuals get out of that cycle. So it kind of like either cosmic superheroes or kind of like cosmic firefighters too, where they've gotten themselves out of the fire, but then they run back in to get other people in the house that is still on fire and help them find the path out of it. Why do I talk about that? Right? I think you missed Buddhism, Pottery. You missed me asking about the master volume of the stream, because I tried to fix that for you, but you can let me know if it's any better. And then we've been talking about lotus flowers for the last little bit. So I think, we've talked about Asbel's development over the course of the game and how he's able to come to terms with his own past and let go of things like, his pain and attachment to his childhood and all of the trauma that happened there, and figure out how to get a sufficient inner peace and tempering of his character to then help other people like Lambda find their way out of their own attachments, right? To the point where at the end of the fourth act, they're able to do that with an entire planet, the spirit of this planet that has kind of been warped by the pain and suffering of everyone on it to the point that it has been distorted, right? But notice also, which is part of why I pulled up the Fodra Queen, that she's not only floating above this lotus flower, but it's a pink lotus, right? And that's significant too, because based on the little refresher that I did for myself on Buddhism before this stream, color symbology, like we've talked about before, big thing in Tales of Grace's F, also big thing in Buddhism. So the lotus flower is itself this idea of enlightenment, transcendence, getting out of the cycle of samsara, but the pink lotus itself is conceived of as like the lotus of the Buddha, right? Like the ultimate representation of enlightenment. So a really interesting color-coded way for the game to tell us something that we already kind of clocked and talked about when we went into the confrontation with the Fodra Queen, which is that even though she is a final boss, there's no sense in which she's evil, right? To the contrary, she's this kind of deity who is in pain and has become like bound to suffering by virtue of the various people who make up her cosmos and her existence, right? And so who else but a bodhisattva like Asbel and his friends and everyone else he helped, like Lambda, to actually heal her and help to rectify the cosmos by helping this deity see things right and find her way back out of the pain and suffering and the cycles of samsara, right? I noticed too when I was looking at the color symbology in Buddhism that, like we talked about with Asbel, this Bodhisattva that we see here, if you look at, again, the back of his jacket, it's a back that really, with the outline, picks out a white lotus. And this is something that I don't think I knew back when I was studying Buddhism. But again, based on the cursory research that I did, the white lotus itself is specifically understood to symbolize that idea of Bodhi, or being awakened, and is associated with this idea of the womb of the world, right? That from which creation stems, which was really interesting to me because it put me in mind not only of the whole theme of children and lineages in Act 4, lineage and legacies, but also that idea that, as we saw, by Asbel coming to vocalize his dream and share that with Sophie and with Lambda and turn it into this force to help guide other people's development, he was kind of giving birth to this sort of lifeline through which other characters could then come to figure out how to transcend their own limitations and move towards enlightenment in a way that frees them from their earthly conditioned aspects of their identity. Like Sophie coming to terms with herself and seeing a new direction and way forward exactly by deciding to inherit and participate in Asbel's dream, just as the party as a whole elects to show Phodra the strength of their dream during that final confrontation. So I thought about that, and it got me excited too, thinking about just the idea of cultivating flower gardens. Like I said, we've been seeing that throughout the game. And if you think about cultivating the lotus flowers in the same way, it feels like something that, to me at least, points to the heart of a lot of what we've been talking about with Tales of Grace's F, this idea that it's not enough, and is almost a misunderstanding for characters to figure out how to grow on their own. Rather, it's only by coming to recognize and support each other and figure out ways in which they can synthesize and merge, like Sophie does with the Little Queen, like Asbel does with Lambda, that we can jointly progress and figure out a way to get out of these cycles of suffering in which we find ourselves, which was nice to me, thinking about, on the one hand, this idea of tending to flowers and creating more flowers, like Bodhisattvas creating more Bodhisattvas to just get this critical mass of people helping other people find their way out of suffering. But then also in that very Buddhist way that ties back to what we were saying with dualizing, right? Recognizing at the end of the day that this self that we point to, this me that there is this kind of illusory and immaterial thing that we have to let go of. And the more we do that, what do we realize? We realize that you and I and all these other individuals are all just aspects of this single thing, this cosmology, right? And I think being able to be sufficiently at peace and tempered with ourselves that we can then break down the boundaries between the self and the other is something that feels deeply in line with many of the discussions we've had about Tales of Graces and characters coming to grow in this synthetic way, and is also in line with the kind of spiritual development that is discussed in Buddhism. So I loved that, and then I loved also just that as a way of thinking about what's going on in this post-game to bring us all the way back to the Zhonecage. Because remember, we've been talking the last few times about how kind of a funny thing, because it's not explained as time travel in the world, but there's also a pretty clear sense in which we have gone back in time without doing anything like a New Game Plus to take the characters to further story content even while going backwards in their own timeline. And that idea again of Asbel as this kind of being that has transcended the ebb and flow of death and rebirth and can now interject himself throughout the world to help others as need be, to me goes a decent amount of distance toward explaining what's going on if he then goes back in time in his own life, even in the sense that we've experienced going from the end of Act 4 to the post-game, in order to help others process their own lives and make new sense of how to free themselves from these cycles of death and rebirth and suffering, and help people from all over his life in exactly the way, perhaps, that we're seeing in the Zhonecage, where it's not just that Asbel has gone back to a different context, but he's gone back to this weird place kind of outside the typical space and time of reality in Ephinia to encounter these various representations of people from across the game. Everyone from Richard's uncle, Cedric, to now Emerald, to characters from other worlds, to help them make sense of themselves in a way that is spiritually more essential than any kind of timeline or sequence of historical events that we were maybe bound to back when Asbel was first making sense of himself. So I thought that was really cool. I was glad to go back to Buddhism because, like I said, I know that we were talking about that a while at the beginning of the stream, and surprise, surprise, didn't really go anywhere, even if our attention did for a while. So that was something that was really rewarding to me and made me feel like maybe there's enough here to kind of gin up some kind of analysis of Tales of Graces F through that lens, similar to what I did with Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism and Tales of the Abyss. So might write about that at some point. We'll see. But as we continue to go through the Zhonecage, in between Aaron's screams of rage and his own suffering, think about that perhaps as one lens through which we can make sense of the grueling activity that the party is doing, where even as they have decidedly finished their own arcs, they're diving back into the world to help others find their way out of it. Okay, thank you, Pottery, for saying you'll let me know about the volume too. I'll keep an eye out for that. Like I said, it's a little bit harder to adjust on the stream itself than just changing the balance, but I'll bear in mind the feedback that you have, and we can tweak it back and forth over the next few streams before we get into Exilia. Oh, you're grinding in Grand Blue Grail. I guess it really doesn't end. Do you even have a sense of how close you are, or is it just kind of a black box right now? Oh, yeah, definitely tell me if you have more color theory thoughts, Pottery. It's something that really hadn't been in my head since our last discussion about it on the stream, but I'll tell you, thinking about it comparatively with color theory and Buddhism, which, like I said, was never my strong suit, as much as color theory in general has never been my strong suit, has really gotten me reinvigorated about it. I don't think it's... My initial inclination tells me it's probably not a coincidence that this game is concerned with both Buddhist ideas and color ideas, put it that way. But I'm interested in doing more research on that, definitely, so I'll let you know if I find anything cool. Oh man, you've been fighting a single enemy all day, Grail? I have definitely had days like that, so I hope it's been a fun thing at least. Like I said with my grinding experience, I feel like it can wax and wane between fun and pain. Okay, Grail. So we have Grail's interpretation of the Zhonecage. I'm going to challenge us, like with Tales of Graces F, to see both sides, where just as things can have a ton of pathos and a ton of comedy in Tales of Graces, let's see if we can think of it as a TV movie that overworked animators put together in 3 days, to quote Grail, and also as a mystical, esoteric journey for Bodhisattvas to help pull other suffering individuals out of Samsara and into enlightenment. Two things can be true. If Buddhism has taught us anything, it's two things can be true. All right. Well, I guess when all was said and done, that was a longer preamble than I expected, but I think part of why it was fun to me was that even back when I was playing through Tales of Graces F the first time and only got through the first 3 acts, I felt like Asbel's coat was really important, but I felt like based on the amount of game that I had seen, my understanding of it was relatively limited, and it was one of those great moments, like we talk about all the time on With the Terrible Fates content and analyses, where it's so easy, especially in a game like this, to partition gameplay away from story. But I tell you, it was really seeing that master art of Asbel's Aurora Lotus, this lotus that's manifested from multicolored light coalescing into white, the white lotus that helped it click in my head in terms of why it might be that Asbel is represented in this lotus-centric way that he is, and how that might shed light on the rest of our journey throughout Tales of Grace's Up. Yes, I'm glad you brought that back up, Pottery. We should hold that in our mind as we keep going forward, because it was really interesting, especially in light of color theory, because I hadn't thought about that connection, that the dragon was talking about the diversity of energy forms and really modes of existence in the world as a diversity of colors emerging from one single color, and the threat being posed by Lambda and Richard specifically consisting in returning the world to one color. So yeah, I don't have top of mind thoughts to get traction on that, but I do think it's important in exactly the way you're talking about, so let's hold it in our mind. So you're doing quests and unlocking higher tiers of difficulty. One fight away from unlocking the next tier of quest, but you decided now would be a good time to change the team layout. I feel like that's not a good time, and I feel like you know that, my friend. Well, at least it's kind of a problem you created for yourself. And when it's a game with gameplay that you love so much, I feel like that's, all things considered, a good problem to have. You know what I mean? Alright, so, speaking of gameplay, to get back to the grindiness of the gameplay, out of the literary and philosophical interpretation, the characters are all a lot stronger now. As you'll see if you're just watching those first few motions of the gameplay, I also rekitted the mixer to have a variety of restore from KO meals in it, along with what I think is a decent array of the spell books. So I'm hopeful that, at least for the time being, we won't encounter a lot of other difficulty walls. And if we do, I'm certainly not above lowering difficulty, although I'll be pretty peeved about it after all the grinding that I did. Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Dale. They are much more manageable than they were last time, so I hope that augurs well for the upper level floors, but because I didn't want to get ahead of the stream, I truly didn't explore any of the other floors at all, so we'll see whether that holds or not. These enemies definitely, I exited the floor during my grinding session by letting the difficulty get up to 200% its maximum, and they were definitely still able to wipe us out at that. But even as high as like 125, 130 now, they're not lethal weapons at least, which is all I was kind of going for.
Is everyone okay? How bad are your wounds?
That was the other thing. I just forgot to say it, dude. No, I specifically took the time to keep Pottery's advice in mind and remap Asbel's arts to hit all of the weaknesses of these enemies. So I am doing that. Whether I do it consistently and effectively, now that's another question, but he is now at least nominally caring about the enemy weaknesses, for what that is worth. Honestly, it actually didn't feel like it made as much of a difference as I was hoping it would, which was interesting. So I don't know whether that means I was doing it wrong, or if that's just an artifact of where we are in the game cycle or something, but I'm definitely still trying to do it. I imagine it might be more useful with the bosses, so I'm definitely going to try to keep that strategy alive when we face Emerald and so on. And yes, Pottery, I love that idea. I love the idea that, what's a way we could put more meat on the bone? Like, because there are so many different forms of suffering in the world, something that we also get quite distinctly in Buddhism. It's not just like suffering with a capital S, there are particular different conditions of existence and life that tether us to it and create the agony of existence. We also need a diversity of different people and perspectives in order to help everyone out of the wheel of suffering in the particular situations and contexts that they find themselves. Yeah. Which is another very Buddhist thing, right? I think I've probably talked about it on the stream before because it's one of my favorite Buddhist concepts to use in the real world, this idea of skillful means, which means that even things that might seem like unethical tactics, like lying to someone or bullying them, whatever, however you want to put it, in the right context, like a teacher needs to know how to meet their student at the level of understanding that they have and the right method to teach that specific student what they need to know to get to the next level of understanding. And so that idea of skillful means is like, even if it might seem like there's something that's wrong to do or the wrong way to express something, ultimately, like lying about the true nature of the world or something, sometimes it can be right to do it in a particular context with someone in order to help them find the way out of their current predicament and on to the next level of study at which things will become clearer to them. And so that idea that you need a diversity of different enlightened perspectives, that is, the different characters in the party, in order to be able to effectively help everyone in the world, and even the world itself, in the case of the Fodra Queen, out of their prisons of suffering and into an enlightened state, feels deeply right and resonant with me. Oh yeah, I saw that he had a title under Honorary Knight. I'm amazed that we haven't unlocked that at this point. Where's that title even live? Oh, there it is. Oh, it's because we stopped right before that. I'm gonna round out the Aurora Lotus title first, just because I foresee myself using that quite a bit. But then we can go to that and grab that costume. Good looking out, Grail. Yeah, I'll tell you, as much as I think I'm ready to move on from Bases Up at this point, since we've been working through it for so long, there is a part of me that's interested, for these reasons that we're talking about, in looking at the way in which it does New Game Plus with the different things that it makes available to you in the Great Shop and stuff like that, because especially given how concerned this game seems to be with Buddhist notions of escaping the road cycle of death and rebirth and transcending and finding peace with your existence in the cosmos and everything like that, it strikes me that it would be really interesting to explore the question of how a game like that concerns itself with the New Game Plus mechanic of basically electing to go back into the entire cycle of the game's history and world and all of the various arcs and suffering that the characters went through. So I might at least look at the grade shot once we're done with this. Does anyone else feel like they've been getting even more spam calls than usual? I know that's just been getting worse and worse for the last, I don't know how many years, but I just got one on my phone while we were doing this, so I feel like even though I usually get a decent amount of spam calls, it's like multiple a day now. I feel like it never used to be that bad. Really to the point where all the conversations I want to happen over things like, texting and Twitter and all that stuff. I just want to disconnect from phone. No one cool ever calls me, guys. Keep My Call is also a pretty cool call out. Aurora Lotus is that. No, it might help actually. Grail, you were telling me I didn't need to do this, but I think because it's Infernal Torrent that's linked to one of these humanoids' weaknesses, I think human, whereas Moonlight Circle doesn't hit any, so I feel like maybe if it goes directly into Torrent rather than going through Circle, that might make it easier to hit all the weaknesses. That might be part of why I wasn't seeing that much of a difference.
amazing!
Man.
Unable to coordinate.
Yep, definitely feeling better mojo tonight than last time. Yeah, whether we're able to sustain it is another story, but one step at a time. The first hurdle is Emerald 2.0. You know, the other thing I love about Aurora Lotus, the fact that you can teleport to enemies, so turn all of their teleportation nonsense right back on them. Well, no, but you know, in this situation, I'm going to call it good enough. He may be a time traveler in a cool, esoteric, mystical kind of way, but he's not a literal space-time warrior like the man, the myth, the legend, Cress Aldane. Chester who? We only care about Cress in Tales of Fantasia.
Everyone stay
Yeah, or just, you know, if you can't get away with slipping through space, just distort your sword with distortion blade and hit the entire field at once. The space-time arts really are just such an exceptional way of making you feel like your character has become something like a god, because they are such unfair manipulations of the like spatio-temporal dimensions of the battlefield. You can see how they pissed us off as much as they did. Great that the art hits her when she's in the air too. Aurora Lotus I'm still talking about. Okay, keeping the percentage down. The battle's also going to take an hour now, which is a great fringe benefit. I think Emerald's over here, right? Memory serves? No, memory does not serve. I think she's up in that case. The turtles is actually useful because even though we have the ocarina, I completely forgot to use it. Speaking of dualizing, can we dualize anything? I think they're all too expensive at this point. Oh, not the mythology bearer. Good deal. Yeah, I think that's a great thread to pull at Grail, and I don't think it's entirely unrelated to what we were talking about in terms of the Buddhist notions either, because, like, especially if you think of the Fodra Queen as a kind of deity, there's a sense, I think, in which she's like the avatar of the planet in the religious sense of avatar, where, you know, gods are these metaphysical entities that don't manifest in the physical world, but then they can elect to be born into the world or represent themselves as particular entities. And I feel like there's a sense in which, and this is again where my religious studies background is just not as robust as I would like it to be, but it would be interesting to explore or maybe talk about with Dan at some point, because I think there's a sense in which when you look at all of the little queens, they're kind of like avatars of the planet and these little representations like antibodies in the immune system, like we talked about at the time. But there's also a sense, I think, in which they're just like representatives of the life and the various life forms on the planet, right? Because there is no real like. The thesis of Buddhism is there's no distinction there, right? It's all just like, it's the same stuff at the end of the day, that's the point. And the conceptual distinctions that we draw are just these kind of illusory categories that we lump on top of it, which might be part of what makes that final struggle interesting, right? The idea that like, we're trying to figure out, well, what is it exactly that we're fighting? Is it a bunch of guardians? Is it the planet itself? Is it this angry god? But I think part of the lesson I see that the game wants to be teaching us is like asking that question is kind of part of the problem, because what we want to solve is not so much like defeating some single force that is threatening existence, but rather figuring out how to harmonize all of existence. It's ironic because I was looking at this the scene where you confront Photra Queen earlier today. And she says really pointedly, you know, the function of the planets is to keep all of life in harmony, and harmony is not enough for you humans. But I was thinking about that in relation to all this Buddhism stuff, and the line strikes me now as just deeply ironic and sad, because, I mean, what does the anger and wrath of the Photra Queen show you? It's not that humans themselves are resisting harmony, it's that the entire cosmos is disharmonious. It's out of harmony with itself, even if it should aspire to be in harmony, right? Which is why I think, like, a cool way to think about that final struggle is not defeating an enemy or anything like that. Rather, it's figuring out how to leverage the lessons and growth of all the individual party members, including Lambda, to reestablish the possibility of harmony in the cosmos. Which in that lens too, right? I talked at length at the time about how much I love that final scene with the single weeping little queen that Sophia then takes into herself. But I think it's also like, it's a profound contrast between that final little queen and the Photra Queen in terms of scope and what it is that the party is facing. And it feels to me like a very Tales thing too, because this party has gone from trying to make sense of themselves as individuals to figuring out how to integrate themselves with their communities and transcend all of the titles that are applied to themselves in order to just recognize themselves as single aspects of a big undifferentiated system, to the point that they can then recognize the harmony in that system and work to bring it about on the cosmological level of dealing with the Photra Queen. But then at the end of the day, how do you actually make that harmony possible? What is it that you do? It's by engaging in these intimate, direct connections with the individual people in the world who are suffering or in pain, like that little queen. So a nice, intimate, personal coda redirecting our focus, I think, after ascending all the way to this metaphysical crescendo that's so typical of the JRPG. Oh no, Grail, you missed everything I was saying? Oh, I was really going off on that comment too. Yeah, watch the VOD. We can keep talking about it too. Yeah, see, Grail, like we were saying about how Buddhism teaches us that all is one, so too are all of these Tales games one. That's the secret. It's all the same game, so you don't need to play more than any single one of them, and you've understood the whole series, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he continued through his encyclopedic indexing and analysis of the series. Yeah, it's gotta be, I was assuming it's a person from Radiant Mythology, right? Like I was saying, it's one of my few remaining gaps, but I think that's the weapon, the game that weapon is based on, rather. All right, let's make sure we're all stocked up. All right, time for another go, Emerald. Hope we can gank you this time. Cross your fingers and toes, my friend. Is she going to remember that she beat us last time?
It can't be.
No, it's the same scene, I think.
Emerald?
Yeah. Well, we can watch it again.
I am Emerald, and I am not Emerald.
What does that mean?
In the body of the humanoid Emerald once used, a soul was born.
So also, since we're taking the time to watch this again, it's actually a pretty good transition from what we were talking about with Buddhism. So consider, since many of the characters that we're seeing up here are quite explicitly not exactly the same character, but a different manifestation of them. Think about that too, in the idea of death and rebirth and these souls progressing through all of these different hells of suffering and always being reborn and reconstituted in different ways rather than finding a way to free themselves of the cycle. And by the way, keep in mind while we're thinking about that Phocelos, this prison that we're on, is effectively this big wheel ring cycle around the world of Aphinia. I think the very nature in which these are kind of like reincarnations of characters we've encountered in the game with distorted memories of their previous arcs and journeys points to exactly what it is that the party is trying to overcome and heal about the world.
Emerald had a certain desire.
There you go. That's a great point, Grail. Yep, it even extends to what we were saying about Amber versus Kahaku versus the different issuances of hearts with the cameo. Yeah, that's a great point. I wouldn't have caught that.
And fulfilling that strong desire has become this soul's calling.
That ended up not being totally clear to me, Grail. I feel like maybe yes, but he felt different than how he was in the main game to me. I didn't feel like I was totally at peace with the explanation that we got, but he was also throwing all the exposition about the EX dungeon at us, so it might have just been a lot for me to process in the moment.
I will not let you interfere.
She looks serious.
But you were on Fodra. How did you get here?
I snuck on board your shuttle when you left Fodra for a... No one noticed me. Neither you nor Emerald.
Here she comes.
That idea too, because like mark what Emerald 2.0 specifically said, that her soul was born from a specific burning desire of Emerald's. That idea that there's a desire so strong in us that we're grasping for something so intensely in the world that we remain bound to it and therefore bound to these cycles of death and rebirth and suffering and duality and all of these other things that differentiate the world and therefore create pain through distinction in the Buddhist tradition. Like being bound by a desire across reincarnations is deeply Buddhist in terms of how samsara is grounded.
Everyone stay on your game.
No,
It's over. This is the end. Here's the sky. Radiant light, strike forward. Divine
All right, so I said I was going to try to be better about weaknesses with the boss, so let me try to be honest with that. So she has aqua, human, machine, aerial, and paralysis. This hits human. That doesn't hit anything, I don't think. Okay, Shatter, Steel Swarm hits for machine. Does he have one for aqua? Plasma Shock hits for paralysis, we have that. I don't know if he... Oh, he does have... Moonlight Circle does. Okay, great. I think that hits most of them, right? Maybe Aerial was left out? Oh, good luck on your fight, Grail. Let us know how it goes. I'm sending you good vibes and good RNG. Yeah, I was thinking of right-sticking it exactly as you said that. So, what was the one I left out? Aerial, right? I know he has some aerial ones. Oh, Plasma Shock also hits for aerial. Great. Well, then I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to stay with these for the moment. Good. Alright, so if we hit all of those, we should hit all of her spots.
Be cleansed by the light!
Be cleansed by light? Another very cool line. Oh man, we are so much tankier now than we were before. I'm so happy. There we go. Full power hits, baby. Oh man, if anyone else in the party was competent at combos, we would have really had a good chain going there. Yeah, I was trying to dodge. It didn't work out quite as well for me as I wanted it to. I remember we got into a rhythm with her during the first fight with her. No luck this time. I tried gaming and reading and talking all at the same time. My life! There we go. Oh yeah, now that's a combo. Oh, that's a combo. Alright, that was our first recipe, I think. Oh, but you forgot about the possibility that I am forcing me to do both, Grail. Also the irony that your very message is forcing me to do both, which is maybe what you were going for, as I think about it. You're gonna die, clown!
Is everyone okay? How bad are your wounds?
Oh, that was awesome. Yep, so I will say, Pottery, to your earlier point, while I didn't feel the hitting of weaknesses making a difference on the regular enemy grunts, I definitely felt it with Emerald. I think that helped a lot. And honestly, I think it's one of those things that, for me at least, in my playstyle, is actually nice to return to this late in the game. I thought it would be a big hassle, but now that, for instance, Asbel's burst art palette is fully filled out, it makes it much easier for me to think about, okay, I can just hit this art, that art, that art, and we'll get them all, as opposed to, like, I know it was technically possible earlier to manage things by distributing between assault arts and burst arts, but having to mesh the two of those, especially with Asbel's transition between the two, was just made it a little harder in my head than I could easily manage on the fly, I think. I am Grail, yes.
Emerald, what was the strong desire you mentioned?
I was pretty bummed out and exhausted by it yesterday evening, if I'm being honest, because I think I did it from like 8 to 11 my time in the evening, but those things pay off, right? You get in what you put into it. You get out what you put into it, rather.
Before Emerald became a humanoid, nature granted her one last gift. The ability to cause insatiable lust in men.
It's not where I thought this was going.
Huh?
Oh, it's true. Men were falling all over themselves just to get a glimpse of her. But this was during a time of war, and such things could not continue. So she prayed. She prayed that her sudden attractiveness would go on forever.
Wait, really? This doesn't have to do with Fodra or Lambda or something important.
Actually, you'll laugh at me, but I have a semi-serious thought about this, so put a pin in it until we're done with this
The
scene.
real Emerald continued to work on those problems.
I remember you saying that, Grail. Yep, that put me in mind of that.
But her desire to remain attractive was passed to me.
I do love that, Pottery. Thank you for telling me. How do you go about sorting your magic cards? Asking as someone who always loses his mind whenever he takes a day to try to do that.
To think she suffered from such a tragic past.
Captain, are we supposed to take this seriously?
Oh, cruel fate! How I yearn to be attractive once more. But now I am little more than a discarded thought. Something the real Emerald simply forgot.
Pardon me.
I admire you, my friend, because I basically have just a closet full of magic cards, which I barely open or even consider addressing because there's just too many of them to even begin to think about sorting. And whenever I do, I just get overwhelmed and say, I just won't think about it. But I might have mentioned this to you already. I recently got conned into starting to play Commander a little bit with a play group around here. So that has gotten me back into deck building a little bit, which has forced me to organize some of my cards a little, which is good. I always feel better once I do. It's just such a tall and overwhelming order to get up to in the first place. Fairy Scabbard. Ooh, we hadn't gotten a new scabbard in a minute. A scabbard in which a tiny fairy seems to be holding your weapon. Handle it with care. I love that. I don't have anything to offer. If your items aren't valuable enough to gain entrance to the higher floors, consider dualizing. Oh, I see. So this is what you were talking about in terms of needing highly dualized things, Grail. Oh, so we may need to actually work on that at some point, because my guess is that's why some of the floors were just grayed out. I hadn't made that connection before. But I think we have a few floors left before we have to deal with that. That's what I tell myself with organizing everything, dude. And like, it's always a good thought, but I find that, at least for me, that thought is enough to motivate me to keep going with being organized for maybe a week and a half, and then I revert to my old ways and it all falls apart. On the one hand, I wish I could be different than I am, but on the other hand, if the Tales games teach us anything, I think it's to learn to live with and embrace who we are. I have been dualizing and not selling. We'll see. Like I said, it's not a problem right now. So, my one serious thought, because I had one of those haha, oh wait moments while Emerald was talking about her strong desire to be attractive. Thinking again about the idea of this wheel of samsara and these different realms of attachment or forms of suffering that people go through. Kind of similar to something like Dante's Circles of Hell, It's been a while since I've looked at like a map of Samsara, but it is also similarly like partitioned into different realms where the people who are trapped there are ruled and governed by different desires or different sorts of attachment. So like the desire to be a ruler and have that kind of power, or the lustful desire to like be sexually intimate with others. So it would be interesting to clock what each of the characters on these different floors is interested in or aspiring to, and then see if we could kind of map that to a model of kind of the different modes of attachment that people struggle with and are liberated from in some kind of mystic or religious tradition like Buddhism. Alright, we do still have stuff at this point, which is good. Oh, I'm scared to lose all my cool stuff, though. Maybe battle tunic. I'm counting on you, Grinding. Don't leave me in the lurch. Alright. I know, and I try to tell myself that. I hate risking the loss of anything, especially stuff that might seem cool or powerful or necessarily more valuable, because we can sacrifice it for something like this. But I know Aaron just has to get over himself. As long as we have at least one thing to sacrifice, and Aaron can be good with the combat, we should be able to work our way through everything. That's what I'm telling myself. Alright, I don't want to jinx us, but these enemies so far seem more manageable than the humanoids, even though it's a higher level floor. So hopefully that bodes well for us. Good job. Says the enemies seem easier. Instantly dies twice in a row.
What's an airhead?
Oh, but the experience is bumped back up. That makes Aaron happy.
Wow, you're amazing.
Alright, but I do now have to remember to dip into the turtle store after every battle, since that's going to be draining our mixer. I actually didn't drain the mixer as much as I thought it would. Okay. Yes, drain those enemies. Drain their brains. Oh my god, so fast. It's a cosmic star. My old beloved nemesis. What are you weak to? Aquatic and reptilian and freeze. What else does Asbel have for us? Freeze, Diabolic Rage, okay. What do we have that's reptile? Reptile. Galema, my old friend. That I think we do have as a shortcut already, so I'll just use that. All-seeing eye. Ooh, new material. And the gang is continuing to level up. I love it.
No mercy! It's time! Expunging! Sword!
Really happy with
Victory is ours!
equipping that spell book to the mixer that doubles the Elith burst time. I don't know why I didn't do that sooner. Makes it so much more potent and easier to hit those top tier mystic arts.
Heed my call! It's over! This is the end! Here's the skies! Radiant light, strike forth! Divine
That was some fancy knife work. What else are you hiding from us? Oh, I'm not hiding.
You are late. I think that's my favorite post-battle line from Sharia off the top of my head. Still makes me smile even after hundreds of hours. Rune Tunic, made with proprietary Stratton technique. Love it. Now did we hit a dead end? Slow charm, alright. Oh, I don't think we actually equipped Asbel's new scabbard after I got all excited about it. Nice!
We will survive! Okay, death to the damned! Plasma Okay, death to the damned! Plasma Death to the damned! Heed my call! Be gone! Death to the damned! Let destruction reign!
I must continue.
Oh man, the enemy strength thing gives me so much anxiety. I'm almost inclined to use the movement speed increase in the spellbook in the mixer. Here I thought there would never be a use for that one. But I think we're managing it okay so far.
It's over! Rip to pieces! Stampede strike! Victory is ours!
It sure is, Asbel. It sure is. Alright, so we went that way. Charm knives. I think we came in from the left, but I don't fully remember. Stole my bar, Pascal. But That is pretty cool, so I'll let you have it.
Yay, all right! I did it! Go me! Yahoo!
There she goes again.
Oh my goodness, Grail. Well, I'm so glad to hear that your family is okay, but that's nuts. Sounds like it's not the first kind of thing stuff like that has happened for you guys either. Oh, well, I'm so sorry. You're all in my thoughts. Yeah, the roads are so unspeakably dangerous, and you can never trust other drivers on it, and so much can go wrong just so quickly and so easily. So, I'm really glad everyone's okay. What a scary thing. Yeah, I think drivers everywhere are crazy and awful in their own ways, but Colorado drivers are just a distinct breed of awful, let's say, where I feel like more often than not when I go out driving, I'll see like more than one accident on the road just caused by idiots, frankly. Yeah, it's sobering. There's no doubt about that. And the best advice my mom ever gave me, definitely mom advice, but it's important advice. Always drive defensively, because you never know what another person on the road is going to do.
I guess the rumors are true. I really am that awesome.
Second time in the last 4 weeks. Oh my goodness. No, I feel you, man. My heart goes out to you, so I wish there was more that I could do, but yeah, know that we're all thinking of you and wishing you our best. That's heavy stuff. Maybe we want to go this way. That's right. I'll wipe out all the roads and replace them with replica roads that have to do exactly what I say. That'll teach them. And I'll get Garlardia's guy to help me with it. To the right? Okay, cool, thank you. Yeah, like I said last time, I have thought about getting out the guidebook again, but I figure, knock on wood, these areas don't seem to be as crazy as the way down the shaft in Fodra. And especially now that we've done a little bit of grinding, I feel like it's not the worst thing in the world to fight a few more enemies and get a few more levels on us. We might have talked about this before with the spirits. I can't remember, but I was thinking more about it. I think yesterday, since we put Pascal back in the party, and because we're always talking about this game next to Tales of Vesperia because we are who we are. And it did strike me as really interesting that they went out of their way to introduce spirits into the games who work pretty differently and have noticeably different names than the typical spirits. Like, it's not Undine, it's Cyandini, it's not Ifrit, it's Bloodflam, it's, is it Sylph, or does the Wind one have a different name too? Anyway, but they could easily, had they wanted the continuity, have named them the same things that we get in the other games. And so I think, between that and even the naming convention of Elith, to say nothing of the fact of its origin and how it works in the world, which we're just starting to learn a little bit more about now with the Chroma Dragons, it really struck me that they do seem to be going out of their way in this distinct standalone game, Tales of Grace's F, to be saying, yeah, you know, the world, it kind of rhymes with the other worlds, but it has its own flavor and there's something importantly different going on here. It's not mana. It's not the summoned spirits you know. They operate by different rules and you got to attend to them in different ways. Maybe at a minimum, like an interesting different way of looking at those distinct realms of existence and perspectives through which we have to engage the world, like I was talking about before, from the Buddhist perspective. That's right. Age of lifeless cars, baby. That's what I think every time a really loud pickup truck goes by, which is roughly every 2.5 minutes where I live in Colorado. It's like, oh, I get having to drive around. I don't think I have anything about cars in principle, but there's a certain number of decibels above which like no car needs to be, and 80% of the cars around here choose to be above that level. It's exhausting. I have to sleep with earplugs in my own bed because these like unstoppable monstrosities will come lumbering by at like midnight or 1 in the morning. Who cares? Oh, thank God. I was getting nervous about that. Sometimes you find it just in time. Another rune tunic. This place is lousy with them. The starfish just twitching in the corner. Did you see that? The best symbol for the madness of this EX dungeon. Alright. A better Celestial 8. Okay, Asbel still working on his Aurora Lotus Adept.
He will survive! Yeah! Okay! Death to the dam! Death by moonlight! Yeah! There!
Well, Kahaku kind of explained it, right? Didn't she say she was like looking for something in her Speria and got lost or something? So, I mean, not as explained as some of the other games explained it, but I feel like maybe she like fell through worlds inside of her Speria or something, which, based on how far I am in Hearts, it's like easy enough for me to wrap my head around intuitively without really knowing what's what yet. Yeah, she's certainly not represented as native to the world in the way that Big is. But that's almost weirder to me, especially in the broader range of the cameos that they do, like we were talking about a little while ago. Like, I get why his being embedded in the world can be a satisfying way to engage with Big, but given that he is a character from his own game and story in a different world, it's kind of like, it's a little weirder and harder for me to wrap my head around the idea that he just happens to live here without explanation, you know?
Heed my call!
Yeah, I was asking for that. I got greedy.
destruction rain!
Oh, that's cool, Gray. And that only makes me want to figure out how to play Rebirth all the more. 'Cause yeah, I do certainly feel, we've talked about this before when it's come up, but I think the more one thinks about the particular choices of characters that are used in the cameo, the more one recognizes their particular themes at work. I don't think it's just like alphabet soup where they randomly reach in and pull one or another out. It's like, it's still my gold standard for that, Edna and Aizen, and the way they tell their story in Tales of Arise. That says so much about both of their stories and so much about Tales of Arise. Okay, make sure we're all equipped and confront a very interesting looking boss over there. I was thinking, Grail, and maybe this also points to what you meant about the idea of graces and hearts being complementary, because, like I said, I was spending some more time with hearts, and it's interesting because on the one hand I can see how they're touching on some similar themes, but on the other hand I feel like they almost have oppositional perspectives about them. Like, as we've been talking about with graces, I think a lot of it is wrestling with all of these titles and different conditional descriptions of who we are, and recognizing that as many of those as we might have to make up our identity, they're all kind of contingent and ephemeral, and the who we are underneath is non-essential in this Buddhist way that I've been talking about on the stream. Whereas with Tales of Hearts, it is all about the essence of the person, right? People have these cores, these souls that you can actually go into and understand, and have these intrinsic attributes that are not attached to any particular title, right? So, like I said, interesting to see those as two, in some sense, oppositional, but by the same token, complementary perspectives. We still don't have enough money for that. Okay, I think we're good. Oh, interesting. Yeah, all from the same team. There you go. And it's nice. It's cool, and one of those things that I'm coming to appreciate more over my time doing Tales of Praxis, that the different teams that have made their contributions to the series over the years are able to have those little arcs, if you want to call it that, right, where they work through sort of their own little design language for what they're thinking about and what kind of battle system they want to have and everything else over the course of multiple games. I want to sit down and spend more time looking at the history of the development process and the different teams, because I have a very pedestrian understanding of that, but I feel like that's kind of the next level down in terms of the game history stuff that I'd love to get to know a little bit better while I'm working through all of the more philosophical and theoretical aspects of it. All right, let's do this. Onward. What is this? Peep it?
Huh? It sounds like a peep it.
Oh my god, what?
Guys?
What's going on here?
Oh, I'm getting acid flashbacks from The Legend of Zelda.
There's so many of them.
Not the cuckoos.
This is starting to creep me out. Peep! 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 Peep!
Look out, Sheria. Here they come.
Here they come, question mark? Oh, hilarious. What a tonal shift in the music and the enemies from Emerald 2.0. I think this time was all about screwing around, actually.
Here's the sky! Radiant light, strike forward! Divine Conqueror! Yeah! Roar!
But again, animals governed by instinctual desire rather than anything intellectual or rational. It's further broadening our palette of different modes of grasping and engaging with the world. Also represented by one of the realms of Samsara, if memory serves. I'll have to brush up on my Buddhist cosmology and metaphysics for the next stream.
It's over. No mercy. It's time.
Peep it party!
Sword!
But notice too, in keeping with the same themes, like silly, cute animals, but all wearing masks that make it pretty transparent that they are represented as suffering in some way. Which is quite sad. Something you don't want to think about too much because then it puts you in mind of those Gregoroi back on Fodra, just quietly hanging out in the garden until we brutalize them. Still not over that, you guys. Oh god, they have a mystic art. I was hoping they would. Wish upon a star! Amazing. That was so cute, I'm not even mad. Okay, they're weak to what? Bird and shot and paralysis. So we've established plasma shock has paralysis, right? Give me something with bird. I'm liking this music though. I could just stay here forever. Concussive bolt gives us shock. Sparrow seal gives us bird. Great. Oh, yeah.
Evil be quelled! Not yet!
The party never ends.
Heed my call!
Grin Sylphie, that's the name of the wind glyph. Which again is rhymes with sylph, but is not sylph to the point I was making earlier.
No escape! Evil be quelled! Okay, plasma shock! Plasma shock!
Strands of sucker give name to the effulgence that brings fortune to all.
Well, to those 2 points, Grail, A, it has me all the more excited that we're looking to Exilia and Exilia 2 after this, because I feel like, for what you've said, that'll give us a lot of interesting and rewarding connective tissue between where we've been and where we're going, excuse me. And second, hopefully, the study that I'm working on now will maybe help to redeem Zestiria a little bit in all of our eyes. And situate Berseria relative to it, because, yeah, I feel like I'm largely outside that bit of the fandom you're talking about, but I do definitely see a little bit of that too, that people just lose their minds over Berseria in a way that's kind of, curious to me, I guess is the right word. Like, I don't want to say, it doesn't strike me as something that is, like, patently wrong, but it's interesting to me that there's such a vibrant attachment to it among the community. Because we worked through it together. You guys know I love Berseria, but I love them all, and I wouldn't say it's my favorite by any stretch. So it is interesting the kind of fervor that it catalyzed in a lot of the community. I know, it's almost like there was a method to their madness. I'm telling you. How can you even really say that you played a Tales game if you don't go all the way through the post game and do this kind of stuff? There's Fodra Queen, and then there's the Peep It Party. We heard you liked mob bosses with the little queens. Just wait, we've got something fun for you.
She said she was torn between eating 10 banana pies or 12. I see.
Well, if that's the thesis grail, then I hope, as I was saying, that we can get a different path into appreciating it with what we're going to talk about next. So it's got me all the more excited to share that and chat about it with everyone.
Did we beat them? Peep! Wait, I hear something. Oh my gosh. Their thoughts are being transmitted by all the airborne Ellis.
I don't want to be sad about little chicks, you guys.
What the hell?
This wicked cook was chasing us all around, Peep! Chasing all my brothers and sisters! So one day, we turned on him and made him go away forever, Peep!
Yeah, I suppose this many birds could take down a grown man.
We were trying to escape again when a big light swallowed us up, Peep Peep! We just want to grow up and become real chickens together! Oh, Asbel.
Don't say it.
Poor little things.
Fear of being consumed.
I knew you were gonna say it.
Yes, but I'm still going to take this grilled chicken they all left.
Sharia, you fucking monster.
The poor things.
Great. I think even Sherry is being affected by the elephant.
Maybe the best encapsulation of the duality of tone that we've been talking about, especially in this post-game. Grilled chicken bowl. Oh, I really wish we hadn't taken that. This is one of the reasons that I'm really excited to be going back to Zestiria and Berseria, also Quadri and Grail, because you remember we talked about a decent amount during those games, the challenge, but I would say also the onus on us as players to make sense of each of the games individually and also in conversation with one another. So what is Tales of Zestiria trying to say on its own, and how can we appreciate that? And same mutatis mutandis with Tales of Berseria, but then also what is the duology trying to say as a whole? And that's something that I'm really trying to think about and figure out the best way to put together in this study, because I think it's funny to think about the way in which Berseria changed the reception and conception of Tales of Zestiria, because I do just feel like in kind of an important way to what the games are saying at the end of the day, what you see and experience in Tales of Zestiria, if you have the benefit of going into it without knowing about Berseria and just working through it on its own terms, is markedly different, with a very different context and different message that is then transformed in an interesting way with Tales of Berseria. So, and maybe that's part of what gets me about the fervor over Berseria, because like, I love Berseria, but I feel like kind of part of what you guys are saying is there's an undercurrent of kind of retroactively resenting Tales of Zestiria more because it was like in the same world but not as satisfying to work through as Berseria. And so I think that's kind of one of the core things I want to challenge in this next study that I'm working on, because I think what at least I see as Berseria wanting to show us gives us, unsurprisingly, given that it's a prequel, a different way of appreciating Zestiria, in a way that shows that Zestiria was only part of the picture of the overall path of progress and development that is warranted in this world. But that's also true for Tales of Berseria. It comes before it in developmental order and is philosophically prior to it in terms of how the possibility of ethics is cultivated. So yeah, I think it's surprisingly complicated, at least to my mind, to make sense of how those two games interact with each other. I think it's for a few reasons a harder question to answer than something like Symphonia and Dawn of the New World, even though Dawn of the New World is also kind of in that sort of sequel but not a sequel conceptual space relative to Tales of Symphonia. So definitely going to try to piggyback off of some of the things I've been wrestling with Dawn of the New World over my last few studies in terms of my overall approach and method to what I'm working on next. All right, floor 7. This is the last one that's not grayed out, so we might have to do some dualizing after this. Yeah, sadly not floor 9 yet, but I think 7 is a good way to go. You might be pottery, but who knows? Maybe it's a good opportunity. Maybe once we publish the next thing, to maybe even reach out to the sub or something and try to get some more hard data on it and people's experiences with it. It is interesting also, to Grail's point, to think about, especially in a prequel that doesn't even refer to Zestiria in its name, how many people maybe just played Berseria with no conception of Zestiria whatsoever, and how that colored their experience of it. Grail, just to make sure I'm parsing you right, were you saying a lot of people showed up and quite liked Berseria or Zestiria when we were doing it on the stream? So I remember that for Berseria, certainly. I don't really remember it for Zestiria. Yeah, Berseria. I know. It's interesting. I mean, this is it's one of the things that I've been talking about in terms of just the diversity of the community and the different ways in which people get engaged with these games, because it's so funny. We'll be sitting down and working through them as we do. I'm just trying to find one of those yellow things so we don't get wasted here. And I'm getting really nervous because I don't know where it is. But then, yeah, there was that person the other day who came in and was just like, yeah, Malik is the best character. And people who say similar things about the characters in like Tales of Berseria, right? So people glom onto these games and particular entries in the series for such a diversity of reasons and with such different kinds of attention, which I think is great. And I think that's, as you know, that's one of the things that I'm trying to make possible with Tales of Praxis, is just facilitating like modes of thinking about these games where it's easier for us to share our different perspectives on them with each other through a kind of lingua franca. Because I think oftentimes, and the Tales community seems to be less susceptible to this than other fandoms, but I think it's easy for communities to get fractured in a way where if people get into it for different reasons, they kind of partition themselves away from other fans rather than talking about the diversity of things that they like in the games and opening people to different ways of seeing them. And it seems like such a lost opportunity in the way that we were talking about on Wednesday in terms of conversations that never happened that would have been so valuable to wall yourself off from other fans rather than seeing what they like about the series and showing them what you like about the series. Long-winded way of saying I'm excited to show people a different way of thinking about Berseria and Zestiria, but it's also really nice to understand where they're coming from and what their experience with it has been. Could have been a common entry point, pottery. That's a good idea.
We won't fail.
So what was it? Berseria was what, like 2017, did we decide? Maybe 2016 in Japan? So what, like 13... roughly 15 years thereabouts, maybe shy, probably like 13 years after Tales of Symphonia. So I don't know if there's like an industry standard for when those common points of entry cycle in terms of like when gamers of certain generations enter series, but I could feel that being a compelling point for like the next wave of gamers of that age entering the series. Yeah, I can see grinding on this floor. The enemies actually don't seem that bad for the difficulty percentage we were just at. Oh, that's interesting, Grail. So maybe just the fact that it was available on PC gave it a broader point of access. Yeah, I don't... I'm so down the rabbit hole of consoles that I oftentimes fail to pay attention to how many gamers do play on PC and are kind of limited to those experiences in terms of what it is that they play and what they get familiar with. Maybe that was part of it.
I'll keep on getting stronger.
Also, like, just for the benefit of anyone who's watching, especially if they're watching the VOD and they didn't watch the Berseria stream, which we spent the most amount of time on of any game other than Tales of Graces F at this point, like, go back and watch those VODs. If you're watching this after I've published my study of Berseria and Zestiria, read that. Like, I have a lot of love for Berseria, deep love, and I think it says a lot of really important things in a really interesting and compelling package. Amazing music, great modes of representation with dream sequences, amazing character studies. So certainly let nothing I'm saying here be construed as ragging on Berseria at all. I think it's just it's always interesting, I think, especially when you have a series that to me feels remarkably even in most of its quality and the things that it wants to study and what it asks you to study as the Tales series. It's interesting to ask why the fan base will sometimes get what feels like almost a rabid attachment to a particular title to either the exclusion of all others or to the exclusion or rejection of another specific game and its continuity, like we're talking about with Tales of Zestiria. We know how you feel, Grail. I thought someone had dragged you away from the keyboard. Can whoever was there drag Grail away again? He needs to take a time out. Yeah, I know that Arise has certainly been a great mothership title for that. Alright, well then, to be clear to anyone watching the VOD, I'm not ragging on it. The rest of the real-life JRPG party is. So, Pottery and Grail are, but as Pottery said, and I'm going to be dining out on this for weeks yet, I was able to at least somewhat turn him around on Dawn of the New World. So, stay tuned for my Berseria and Zestiria study. I might try to move the immovable mountain again. We'll see. But it has to be an intellectual conversation with the gameplay setup of Tales of Graces. Like, it's not going to be a Tales of Berseria style intellectual conversation where you just button mash the different claims that you want to make with no sense of rhyme or reason to it. It's got to be principled. Seabream, my beloved, gonna make me want to order sushi after this. I gotta do a podcast instead.
Everyone stay on your game.
Roar! Die! Eat this! Roar! Charge! Okay, be cleansed by the light! Destruction rain!
Eagle's eyes!
Strike!
No, I know what you mean, Grail. That is a good point of clarification. Because we did, and let this be a testament to the whole Tales of Praxis ethos also. I think you'd both agree with me that for all of the ragging that you're both happy to do, and I'm happy to do, on Tales of Berseria. We had some amazingly rewarding conversations digging into and celebrating the different themes in its narrative and how it was symbolically representing things and the way in which it was challenging a lot of the norms of the series. So to be able to dive into that in a series like Tales, even in the titles that don't naturally gel with us, I think is a testament both to the mode of conversation as well as to the series that's the object of our study. Tyria gained the Stabber title. I'm in. Peak level design, we can all agree. Every other game is just trying desperately to live up to the standard of Tales of Berseria. Don't quote me on that. Jokes, we've got them. That is maybe an interesting question. Because, like, you say that about the different kinds of variation, Grail, and I wonder whether you guys have any thoughts on this. Because, as you know, Fantasia is still fresh in my head. And I think it's kind of interesting, maybe, to think about the difference between games that have putatively a bunch of different areas, but that all have similar design. So if you're thinking about like the typical level navigation in something like Zestiria and Berseria, and you don't want to be charitable to it, versus games where there are only a small number of areas and they're all relatively different from one another, but you see them like in different eras across time, right? Like I'm thinking of something like, like Thor or Euclid or something in Tales of Fantasia, right? Where it's a pretty small area. There's not a lot to explore, but you see it in different timelines, and so things are a little different, and so you kind of explore it in that way. Do we feel like one of those modes of variation is more interesting or engaging than the other, between kind of, let's call it the Berseria Zestiria model versus the Fantasia model? I don't know if there's an interesting insight at the end of that book, but it's just a passing curiosity as we work through this.
We will survive! Yeah! There! You're mine! Strike! Draw! Heed my call!
I'm gonna enlighten the fuck out of you. My Aurora Lotus.
Let's keep moving.
Okay, so, but to be fair, Grail, you're kind of dodging the question a little bit, because you could ask that about like a more modern time travel game with a similar like design philosophy. So for instance, right, I think you said you maybe started this but did not finish it, but Scarlet Nexus, right, another Bamco JRPG, another time travel game, I think 2020, maybe 2021, by the same creative director that was behind Symphonia and Tales of the Abyss, and a similar perspective, right? Like maybe, yeah, there's more areas overall, but a lot of it is you're seeing like the same few areas across different timelines and looking at how those little effects change the area, right? So I think it's still something that is a distinct way of like making and designing the navigation of a world, even as the worlds have gotten bigger, which is part of what makes me curious about whether we prefer sort of exploring a lot of areas that are pretty samey or exploring a few areas that vary across timelines. You had me in the first half of your comment, Pottery, and then you went for the killing blow with the gut punch against Esty and Bestie. Well, I'll say this. I think I mentioned it on the stream the other day, but definitely one of the things that I'm hoping to weave into my study is at least a little bit of interpretation of why the world exploration is structured in the way it is in those two games. I don't know how granular I'm going to get to with the level design because I was thinking about it more on a global scale, but I will say, as we're thinking more about the nuances of the level design, it encourages me a little bit to get a little more granular on it. So maybe I'll mull if there's anything that my interpretation can cash out in terms of charitably justifying the world navigation that we have such fraught opinions on. Well, it's easy to name 4. They give you 4 dungeons on the cheap because the 4 Trials of the Shepherd.
We will survive.
Which I'll also say, like, you know, it's easy to talk in broad strokes, dragging on like the dungeons and the world, but I think I would at least say that there are some pretty cool set pieces in dungeons for both of those games. Like, as much as I had forgotten the second act of Hysteria when we went into it this time, I do actually think that the way in which it leaves like lessons in Soray's moral development as the shepherd into these 4 dungeons with these little short stories, I think that's pretty cool and memorable. Oh no, it's the guy who was batter up for the chickies on the last level. No, but see, I know what you're saying, and you guys are being kind of brutal, but like, yeah, if you just say water temple, but like, if you specifically think of the water temple in Hysteria, like, do you remember that? You're putting together the story of a shepherd who got corrupted and turned into a Hellion, and it's wrapped up in the myth of Azura. Like, that's a really cool little short story. It teaches Soray a lot about the dangers of his own journey. It's fun and sort of a little microcosm of piecing together the Earth and Historia to collect these little diary entries and see Azura slowly degenerate. Like, I get what you're saying, and like I said at the outset, I'm not going to stand up and say that it's my favorite dungeon design because that would certainly be a bridge too far, but I think sometimes it's a little too easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater in some of these reflections on those games, you know? Oh, you want me to literally name them according to the names they were given in the game, Pottery? Well, fine. Then maybe I would say I probably literally can't pull up the names, but then I would also say that's beside the point of what you were asking. Unless you were being really pedantic, in which case I don't think that's the interesting question to be asking. Oh no, you were stuck on him the longest out of the Zhonecage enemies? Well, I'm a little concerned about this now. He looks like a sillier version of the Gentleman. The gentle fish, maybe? Gentle eel! I was close. Well, if you guys are being serious, then I think it might just be another magical case in which we have a diversity of ways in which we think about games, because, like, maybe it's just Old Man Aaron's difficulty of keeping names in his head. Like, I can remember character names and names that are assigned a special meaning in the world, like, you know, the immortal dragon in the sky for Tales of Berseria, right? I remember that because of its meaning, but I feel like in many cases in games, even some of my favorite games and even my favorite dungeons, like the names that the dungeons are given do not oftentimes have some kind of inherent and deeply memorable meaning and content in themselves. For me, it much more consists in the navigation of the dungeon, its structure, what you learn there, the challenges that you have to overcome. So, like I said, it might be to each their own, or you might be thinking of some dungeons with really meaningful and specific names, but for me, it kind of it misdirects a lot of what I'm looking for in terms of the meaningful dungeon experiences to be pointing to names specifically. I don't know though. Like, I think of Tales of the Abyss, I think of like Aldrent, of course, but I was also able to think of like the Immortal Dragon in the Sky. I think end dungeons are probably usually given those sorts of special names. Vinheim and Tales of Symphonia, sure. But also the Throne of Artorias and Tales of Zestiria, right? Whereas a lot of the other ones, especially in Tales JRPGs, I feel like are mostly just oftentimes just areas as much as anything, like, oh, these ruins or that forest or that region. And so oftentimes, like, when I'm going in and navigating an area, I'm sure you've even seen this on the streams, right? Like, I'll be interested in where we're going next in the story and what it is that we're going to work through and discover in the dungeon. I won't oftentimes stop to think about the names that much. Yeah, like even for, like, I'm thinking of Tales of Symphonia, the ones that come up for me is like, yeah, Tower of Salvation, I guess. Like the temples of the different summon seals, but again, that feels like as generic and therefore obvious a name or referent, if you prefer, as something like the Trials of the Shepherd. So I don't know, guys. Yeah, I don't know if I'm buying it, to be honest. The number of times you reference it certainly helps, Grail. I'm not going to discount that. Gentle eel gazed down upon them before speaking in a kind voice. In a kind
Captain,
voice.
this is Gentle Eel.
Gentle eel, huh? He sure is big.
What's that now?
Yeah, and see, just to put a button on it, Grail, that's kind of what I was saying, because I feel like if you're asking what you remember from the dungeons, like, I do feel like there are memorable sequences and moments in all the dungeons, right? Largely concerned with, like, the whole conceit of Tales of Praxis, the thematic content that they add to the story and how we're working through the world. And I feel like, well, the actual mechanics of working through the dungeons or the way in which they're laid out might not be our favorite in Zestiria and Berseria, and even Arise, for the reasons we've talked about in the past. I think they still make at least some really interesting and memorable contributions to the games and what they're trying to say. That's all I'm saying. So I'm trying to think about them charitably and not forget what they contribute to that world. And to what it is that it's concerned with. Because, like, I'm definitely going to remember the Zhonecage, but, I mean, the Calyx is really interesting. I remember being really interested in that with Sophie and Jade there, and everything it added to the lore of the Desolation, even before it was further unfurled in Tales of Berseria, which made it much more interesting to me. And the Heavenly Step, like, I'm going to remember losing my mind trying to figure out how to get through there, in the same way I'm losing my mind navigating these areas now. And you'll remember how much I gushed at the time. Like, the reward in the dungeon of pure primordial lore of where the world came from in the last way I expected was such a cool kind of unexpected dungeon reward mechanism that actually I felt like was something pretty cool and unusual, that I don't often, take as table stakes for what you're going to get in a end game or post game dungeon like that, an optional one. And so, like, that's something I'll remember as special too. Yeah, see, and so what I would say, Pottery, is like, I mean, I feel like, to my mind, the most generous way to put it is like, because as we've been talking about in the last several times, and what's so essential to With a Terrible Fate, right? All of these games, by virtue of being these interactive stories, are so bound up with our experience with them and how we choose to engage with them. So I think, like, for me, the right metric is what is it that you as a player individually are usually looking for and taking from dungeons, and then comparing that across games, which games light up those aspects more for you and which ones less so, right? So I think, you know, if that's your case for thinking about and remembering and codifying things according to names, so much the better for you. That makes sense. But I think, like, I bring it up in my case with, like, the meaning that you derive from dungeon navigation, because I think, like we talked about during Zestiria and Berseria, I definitely, like, I'm not blind to everything that we're talking about. I certainly feel it working through those areas too, where it does feel like a little bit less engaging, but I feel like in terms of what it is that I at least am trying to get out of dungeons from how it is that I engage with them, and extrapolate to what it is that we think dungeons structurally offer and contribute to the nature of games more broadly, I think they definitely still are constitutive of the particular language that Zestiria and Berseria is putting together for how they want us to work through those worlds. So I think it's just, it's another version of what we've been talking about with Dawn of the New World, right? Where I think, like, it deviates from what we're accustomed to the series in a way that makes it really tempting to simply discount those aspects of the games and write them off altogether. So just in the spirit of charity that, you know, I'm all about, I'm interested in at least looking into them in a way that could justify them before we decide to throw them out, if that makes sense. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. If I'm reading your messages right and not getting lost, that I do find, like, some of the dungeons in those games, Zestiria and Berseria, memorable in the way that I do with other games. And that's fair, Grail, and I think that's a good way of encapsulating the broader point too. And we'll get back to the game after I catch up on these. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that I'm kind of centrally concerned with navigating in this series that we're doing too, right? Is, like I always start off with, I think there's a lot of substance and analytical importance to the idea that these games, by virtue of their themes and the journey they ask us to go on, are deeply personal and cultivate a kind of personal attachment to us. So I think, like, it's really interesting for me to think about this, like, complicated nexus of attributes that draw us into a game between sort of relatively emotionally neutral things like design and mechanics versus, like, very emotionally charged things in terms of the themes they want you to consider and the characters they get you to resonate with and just the overall tone of the story that they tell. So I feel like oftentimes, like you're saying, Grail, you know, we can find ourselves just drawn into a certain one of these games and then the world just clicks in a way where we're really tuned in and ready to engage with and appreciate every aspect of it. Whereas sometimes if we don't resonate right off the bat, then everything else can feel kind of lifeless and flat. That, I think, as much as anything, is a good crystallization of my motivation for why I'm approaching these in the way that I am, because, like, I would not say that every one of these games tonally pulls me in and magnetizes me to every aspect of the game in the way that my favorites do, but I do really strongly feel that they're cut from the same cloth in terms of being centrally concerned with important and really human ideas and trying to scaffold a whole pretty coherent experience in each one, asking you to go through and work through those ideas in a particular way. And so trying to kind of intellectually work yourself into the emotional state to buy into that, even if it's not what you're naturally interested in the first place, if that makes sense, I think can help give us a lot more flexibility as players and people engaging with these artworks, and just analysts wanting to get more out of them at the end of the day, if that makes sense. Yeah, and that's where I'm at, Grail. And again, like, maybe that's more an artifact of how I play these games or my memory at this point in my life, but I can remember the name, like, Princer in Tales of Hearts because that's literally the city I'm going to next. And then, like, I would be hard pressed to think of any other area's specific name beyond that off the top of my head without going and looking back. But that doesn't mean I'm not loving all of the, the dungeons and experiences and hearts. That's just kind of a different way that I schematize it. Well, and I'll take that, pottery, because that smells like a challenge to me, and I wasn't even trying to meet a challenge with the Dawn of the New World interpretation. So, and my analyses are always more fun for me when I'm trying to solve some puzzle or satisfy some impossible threshold too. So that'll be good. Yeah, I mean, you got what, the Stone Tower Temple, the Great Bay Temple, the Snowhead Mountain Temple, I think is what it's called, up in the mountains with Darmani and the Goron, and Goat. I forget the name of the Swamp Temple. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. I just like, even many games that I know inside and out and I could work through on the back of my hand, like, yeah, the names of locations, always hard for me to keep in my head. Harder, I think, right now, just because, like I've talked about in the past, I have to keep multiple full-length JRPGs in my RAM while I'm working through Tales of Praxis, so that might make my memory for things like place names a little more ephemeral than it otherwise would be. But yeah, people process and latch onto things in different ways, I think that's the essence of different modes of gameplay that we were talking about. And there's the Xenoblade reference. I knew we would get there, Grail. Oh, that's fun though. You don't know what I hate about Berseria and Zestiria. All right, well, I know you watched the streams, Grail, so I would challenge you to try to put a name to that, because I'm not sure that I can either, but I definitely, like I've said, I mean, I get everything, I think, that people are saying about it and what they don't love about it. I just, I'm interested in seeing the other side of it. That's what I'm saying, Pottery. It may seem like I'm being defensive at the time, but no, I'm actually really just fallible. And I try to be honest, especially with my stream friends, about my blind spots and points of fallibility. If it was something that I knew quite well, then I would be honest about that. Yeah, 3 for 4 ain't bad. And then the Moon, obviously, which I would say counts, and the Moon Children's Dungeons. Like I said, I could walk you through Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. I could, go with a blindfold and a controller through the first Dark Souls, but telling you all the place names along the way, it's a bit more of a question mark. Probably tied in with the fact that, like I've said before on stream, I think, like, I need Google Maps to get around my hometown. So just like that kind of navigation, the thing that taxi drivers have out the wazoo, that little portion of their brain, like that, I don't think that exists in my brain, for whatever that's worth. Yeah, that's what Wiki was invented for, right? I'm sure that hasn't helped with my memory either. Gentle Eel tilted back his head and began to boast.
Yes, I see.
What now?
He says he was born in Lake Grail.
Holy cow! Lake Grail eels are among the most expensive fish on the market.
I can see why if they look like that. Jesus.
Hold on a moment, Mr. Eel.
Gentle Eel is startled by the loud man and stares silently at the party. Hilarious and totally in keeping with the EX dungeon, by the way, that now we have this unvoiced narrator on top of all the other craziness that's going on here.
I have been lucky enough, on occasion, to dine on Lake Grail eel. The aroma, the texture, the moist succulence that drips down your chin like fishy honey. You, sir, are no Lake Grail eel. I bet you weren't even born in Windor.
Jameson Price, I love you. Voice everything.
Not from Windor?
Gentle Eel's lower lip begins to tremble. When he next speaks, it is in a whisper.
Oh.
That one older British man. Who are you talking about? Yeah, that one older British man. Like Stephen Fry?
Gentle Eel says that's not
Ian
true.
McKellen?
He
Patrick
says he has a
Stewart?
birth certificate and everything.
Oh, there are birth certificates in this world. The little things we learn as offhanded jokes and post-game content.
Lies, sir. Damn lies. I can tell by the texture of your fleshy underbelly that you are but a common river eel.
r/unexpected Baldur's Gate.
Now, prepare to pay for your crimes.
The thinnest excuse for a battle in the whole game. Weak against Nova, Aqua, and Burn. And the most hilarious music track in this whole game to use as a boss fight theme.
Evil be quelled!
Yeah, I guess because he said he was born in the lake is the idea there. Nova and we want white circle.
It's over! Rip to pieces! Stampede strike! Strike! Roar!
Gentle, you'll know. I'm going to aggressively remind you, Grail, that with the way you think about your writing and gaming, I'm sure that working through Relink is a mode of working on your writing for you, even if you don't consciously realize it. So don't be hard on yourself. Also, I know it's been on my list for a few days, but I am very excited to treat myself to that bit of writing you sent me. So I was hoping to get to it today, but I think it's going to be a nice little event for me to break up. Super Bowl weekend? That's this weekend, right? I don't sport, as you all know, but I think the last time I crawled out from under my rock, I heard that was happening this weekend. Every single side quest, that's appropriately nuts for that word. So then we won't be able to, right? Because despite spending a ridiculous amount of time on this game and using a guide, we somehow missed some stuff along the way. It's kind of a bummer. He is iconic, the gentleman. But I can settle for the gentleman. Oh man, that is a very annoying attack. God, he can move. That's true, but we didn't manage to talk to all the cats in the world, right? Because didn't you say we needed to do that to get to Cat's Corner? But maybe that doesn't count as a side quest. I think that's the one thing I had on my mind that we might not have gotten to. But that might be something we can go back to also. So maybe we're not blocked out of it. Joke's on you. Tales of Grace's F is the game that never ends. I don't like it. Yeah, I can see why this fight peeved you off so much, Grail. This is not fun.
Death by moonlight! Burn! Let destruction reign! Let destruction reign!
Yeah, since we were able, like you were saying, to somehow go back and do that whole conclusion to the flower side quest, I feel like we somehow were able to resolve that after all, by the grace of the Tales gods. Still don't know quite how that happened, but I'm not going to look a gift horse enough. Maybe it was some esoteric Buddhist thing in the way I was talking about, where after we were able to enlighten an entire planet, then all of the rest of the literal and symbolic flowers followed suit. I choose to believe that, until given a better explanation. Oh yeah, so similar to what you were saying about Artorias after the Heavenly Step. Yeah, that makes sense. I do like that, at least based on what sense we've been able to make of the EX dungeon so far. Like, you can understand why it would be logical that sort of liberating the world from these other entities would strengthen Lambda, or strengthen Artorias for that matter. Oh man, this boss was so cute, and now he's really pissing me off. Oh, it changes his name too? Well, that's cool. I think you mentioned that at the time, but I'd completely forgotten. That does make me kind of want to revisit it. It's gross that he can get this gross while he still has 40,000 hit points left. Like, that's not a low number of hit points. Lambda Theos. Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, the Greekness of it all is something that we also haven't talked about in a while. Might be worth going back to at some point. I hate these moves so much. I'm gonna just use Asbel's unblockable Master Art because that's what you deserve. Kershaw. Oh, drag. Sophie missed all those experience points. Well, alright. One and done at least. There's that. Already a leg up versus our encounter with Emerald. Prolific Priestess. How's that for a title? God, but like a swimmer on multiple axes. It's flying through the air, going on the ground. And some octopus energy. It's crazy. Gentle eel, his eyes brimming over with fishy tears, speaks in a halting voice. Not more suffering.
Yes, Oh, so He says he's sorry. He didn't know. His mother told him he was special, and he always just believed
Jesus Christ, this game.
The truth will always come out in the end. Better to face it than to ruin your entire life.
Okay, Jamie, so for this EX dungeon, the direction is on every floor, you just go a little bit more nuts than on the previous floor until you're no recognizable character by floor 9. Sounds good. I'm in. I have no follow-up questions.
That was impressive, Captain.
It was, wasn't it?
Eau de peau! Cologne with a terrible stench. Be careful not to let them see through your disguise. Oh, man. Even a silly anthropomorphized gentle eel, they can get to tie back into core themes of the game. And even with an item that speaks to Malik's dual nature and hidden past and everything like that. Oh my god, have I mentioned to you guys that this is a perfect game? I don't care how much I rant about the difficulty. This is just, ugh. Talk about memorable games. That's true. It's his time to shine before becoming everyone's dad in the future. Got a Malik skit. Speaking of,
You smell like the inside of a barn. You need a bath.
when Pascal tells you
I
that.
thought I'd try out a new cologne. You don't care for it?
It's a wonderful fragrance. And the only one who needs a bath here is you, Pascal.
Some perfume wouldn't kill you either.
Do you like fragrances, Sharia?
Yes, and this one especially. It's kind of sweet, but still quite elegant.
I could let you borrow some.
If you don't mind, I'll take just a little. Hey, Asbel.
Yeah?
Now hold still, okay?
Hey, don't spray people in the face with cologne.
She thinks you need a bath, Asbel.
What? But I bathe every single day.
You smell great.
If you're going to use it like that, buy your own.
Why bathe when you can just use perfume and cologne and deodorant? That's the one lesson. If you take one thing away from Tales of Grace's F, you don't need to bathe. Just use deodorizing equipment. I think we can all agree. We learned something valuable in the end. That's the true lesson of Buddhism, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, I don't think I've gotten to that one yet. I'm excited. Alright, so we're about at the time to wrap up. So it was that kind of stream, which I am totally fine with. Alright, so that can be Aaron's homework. I'll do some dualizing before we jump into the Monday stream so that we'll be able to knock out the last 2 floors. And then we'll be able to do cleanup on the million other post-game things in the never-ending Tales of Grace's F. Dualize a dream flange. I don't know what that is. Yeah, I mean we can do it. We can do it now if you know how to dualize it, just so we're ready to go. Be easier than Aaron figuring it out on his own. I've been loving the skits and hearts. It's great. You know what I love about it? It's a great, for me, it's a great callback to and way of building on the foundation of Symphonia with its opaque relationship building skits that you get on those glowing circles throughout the field. The way that they have made the intimacy mechanic between characters kind of even more directly related to combat. And have made the skits that influence that much more numerous and complex in the way that they inform those relationships is very, very cool to me, and the content of them is very fun. Can charge the mixer also. Alright, so what were you saying we could dualize, Crown? Yeah, I'll definitely say as we're talking about hearts on top of Graces, on top of Fantasia, on top of all the other Tales games, I think if you could, try to appreciate Old Man Aaron trying to hold all of those plots and characters in his mind at one time. I think that once Tales of Praxis is done and dusted, it will be easier for me to remember proper place names. But I'm definitely realizing now the maximum bandwidth I have for keeping various complex, rich and nuanced JRPG details in my head at once. It's possible. It just takes some work in partitioning. A rare shot staff with a high-grade crystal. Okay. Surely we have a rare shot staff at this point. Fandom's Light. I feel like that's probably rare. Try to dualize it with a shard and make it epochal. Can make it wicked and barbed and unadorned. I don't think I can... Oh, it's literally called Rare Shot Staff. Don't think I have one of those. No, is it one that's sold at the turtle store? They sell Rare Sword. Don't sell Rare Shot Staff. I don't think we have that right now. But we can go out of our way to get it, or we can try to get something else. My plan was based on the way it was describing it. Okay, I can just go to Grail side too. Well, here. We're going a couple minutes late, but it will be nice just to have this done and dusted before we wrap things up for the evening. Well, if you can just give me like one thing to make for the next 2 floors, I mean, that'll cover us, right? There are just floors 8 and 9 left, right? We did the other ones? Yeah, that's right, because we did 3 floors and we started at 5. Does not seem to be selling a rare shot staff. Is it the kind of thing that I have to spend more at the store to get them to unlock more items? Well, you know, yeah. Grail, why don't you just... Yeah. You can send me the page, or I'm sure I can find it. I can figure that out over the weekend so that we can just wrap up. Yeah. Yeah, because we're already running over, so I want to be good to folks, and I also have that appointment to record the podcast, which will be fun. So here, I'll just save for us, and then we'll call it. Yeah, no worries. I would appreciate that, but like I said, I'm sure I'll figure it out otherwise. Don't remember where the inn is here. Oh, you're exhausting, Grailside. I just wanted to save. I'll go back to the Zhonecage. Alright, my dear friends. Well, another richly textured stream, let's say, on our post-game adventures. I at least am glad that it didn't end in abject failure like the one on Hump Day. Thank you for bearing with me through that. But like Grail said, what is Twitch if it's left without any rage? So we got to fill that part of the emotional palette too. But more analysis and discussion, not just of the symbolic content of this game, but also of the design language of the series tonight than I expected, which was a lot of fun. A pleasure digging into the ins and outs of dungeons, and if you didn't already know it, hopefully our conversation was a good indication that we're going to have a heck of a lot of fun going back to Berseria and Zestiria in that upcoming study. So I'm excited about that, all the more so after tonight. I hope you are too. Fun to dig into more perspectives on flowers. Hopefully my first thoughts on the ways in which that connects to the Buddhist and more mystical concepts within the game was useful and interesting to you. And definitely keep thinking about the color theory stuff that we were chatting about and that Pottery brought up as well, because I think we'll get some good mileage out of that. And of course, we are continuing to grind and wrench and rally our way through the remaining challenges. I got a good feeling that we'll be able to wrap up in the next couple days, and I know it's been a long journey. Hopefully you'll agree with me. It's been a really rich and rewarding one, and even with something as bizarre and baroque as the gentle eel, I continue to see these themes getting all the more nuanced and unfolding and connecting with the rest of the game in some really cool ways. And we haven't even reached the climax of the EX dungeon yet, to say nothing of what waits for us afterwards. So very excited to see where this takes us next. I'm looking forward to it. I know. Well, I'll make you a deal, Pottery. You can be my extended memory with location names, and I'll keep in mind all of the plot details and character names and thematic and philosophical concepts. And between the two of us, we can put together the whole game. And Grail can be the master keeper of the gameplay systems. How about that? It was a pleasure. Yeah, I hope the Buddhism stuff was fun. Like I said, the connection between these games and these various intellectual and religious and cultural traditions in which they play, for me, has been a really cool way of building out different ways of seeing the value in them, especially in this Tales of Praxis adventure. So I hope it's cool for you too. And we're going to see how all of those insights and connections bear fruit as we continue on in this journey and through our upcoming analyses. So looking forward to that. Yeah, and on that last note, Grail, too, yeah, seriously, thinking about your family, I'm glad everyone was okay, but I know that can be a harrowing situation, so my best to you and yours as well. All right, my dear friends, well, such a pleasure. What a great way to kick off the weekend for me. A great Friday evening thinking about games and religious studies and the philosophy of game design and everything else. I hope that you think well and game well and enjoy yourself over the weekend. Be good to yourself. Have some fun wherever it may take you. Be safe. And we'll be back in the same time on Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern, to get stuck back in, work through more Zhonecage, and based on the tenor of the last couple streams, probably dig into a bunch more rich and rewarding literary, theoretic, and philosophy of game narrative stuff along the way. So all the usual stakes, in other words. Until then, I've been your host, Aaron Suduko, for Tales of Praxis. Check out withaterriblefate.com if you want more studies and analyses of the storytelling of video games. We'll see you again soon. Cheers.